Hi everyone, we are Nightmare Narratives and we are here to help you today. I know you will use this video to fall asleep before, so like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. It was a typical evening in the small town of Ridgewater. The air was still, and the sun had long set behind the rolling hills that framed the sleepy neighborhood. Allison Foster, a woman in her late 20s, sat curled up on her worn-out couch, her attention divided between a mindless TV show and her smartphone, endlessly scrolling through social media. Her cat, Luna, lay sprawled on her lap, purring softly, providing a comfort that felt increasingly essential in recent weeks. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as Allison found herself glancing around the room every so often, the eerie stillness making her feel oddly uneasy. It wasn't unusual for her to spend nights alone. Since her breakup with Josh, she'd grown accustomed to the silence. But tonight, the silence felt oppressive, as if the walls were closing in on her. Then it happened. The phone rang, a sharp, unexpected sound that cut through the silence and made Allison jump, sending Luna scampering to the other side of the room. Allison frowned as she glanced at the screen. The number was unknown. At this time of night, it was unusual to get calls from anyone, much less from a number she didn't recognize. For a moment, she debated whether to answer, her thumb hovering over the accept button. A part of her said to ignore it, let it go to voicemail, but her curiosity got the better of her. Hello, she answered hesitantly, her voice sounding quieter than she'd intended. There was no response on the other end, just a faint crackling sound like a poor connection. Hello, Allison repeated, her heart beginning to race slightly. The crackling persisted for a few moments longer, and just as she was about to hang up, a voice spoke. It was low, barely a whisper, but unmistakably there. Allison. Her name. The voice spoke her name with a slow, deliberate tone that sent a shiver down her spine. She froze, gripping the phone tightly as her mind raced. Who is this? How did they know her name? Who is this? She asked, her voice steady despite the growing knot of fear in her stomach. There was no response, just more crackling, then silence. She pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at the screen. The call was still active. Her mind raced as she considered hanging up, but something kept her from doing so. She brought the phone back to her ear, hoping for some kind of explanation. Nothing. The line was dead. Allison hung up, her heart pounding in her chest. She stared at the phone for a few moments, waiting for the caller ID to show up, for some clue as to who had called her. But there was nothing. No number, no name. Just the unsettling memory of her own name being whispered through the static. Shaking her head, she tried to brush it off. It was probably just some prank, a wrong number that happened to know her name. Maybe someone in the neighborhood messing around. She tried to convince herself of that, but the sense of unease lingered. Allison set the phone down on the coffee table and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unsettling encounter. She grabbed the TV remote and cranked up the volume, filling the room with noise in an attempt to drown out her own thoughts. But the unease didn't fade. She glanced at her phone again, half expecting it to ring. Minutes passed, and nothing happened. It had to be a prank, she told herself again. Just a coincidence. She decided to get ready for bed, hoping that some rest would put her mind at ease. Heading upstairs, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow flickering in her peripheral vision seemed more sinister than it should have been. As she pulled the covers over her, Allison tried to push the incident from her mind. She'd wake up tomorrow, laugh about how paranoid she'd been, and forget all about the strange phone call. But as she lay there, staring up at the ceiling, sleep eluding her, she couldn't help but wonder who that voice belonged to. It sounded familiar in a way she couldn't place, as though she'd heard it before, but in a distant, forgotten dream. She turned over and glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight, and exhaustion was starting to take its toll. Closing her eyes, she allowed herself to drift into a light sleep. Then, just as she was on the verge of slipping into unconsciousness, the phone rang again. Allison sat up with a start, her heart pounding as she reached for the phone. She glanced at the screen, and once again, the number was unknown. Her fingers trembled as she answered the call. Hello, she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then, once again, the same low, crackling voice whispered her name. Allison. This time there was something more to the voice. It was colder, more deliberate, and somehow it sounded even closer. Who are you? She demanded, her fear boiling over into frustration. But there was no answer, just the crackling static like before. Allison's hand shook as she ended the call, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. She sat there in the darkness, staring at the phone, unsure of what to do next. Whoever was calling her knew her name, and they weren't stopping. As the silence settled back over her, the oppressive stillness returned, suffocating her thoughts. She didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Allison didn't sleep the rest of the night. She stayed up, curled under her blankets, eyes wide open, waiting for the phone to ring again. Every small sound in the house made her jump. The creak of the stairs, the distant hum of the refrigerator. But the phone stayed silent after that second call, and with each passing minute, the stillness felt heavier, like a growing weight on her chest. Morning came with little fanfare. The sun crept through the blinds, casting soft light over her bedroom. But it didn't bring the sense of relief Allison had hoped for. Her mind was racing, and the exhaustion was overwhelming. But the lingering fear kept her from falling back asleep. The calls, the voice. Someone out there knew her, someone who wanted to frighten her. Dragging herself out of bed, she checked her phone for any missed messages or calls. There was nothing, no record of the unknown numbers from last night. It was as if they had never happened. But Allison knew better. The voice, the sound of her name being whispered, was burned into her memory. She stumbled through her morning routine in a fog of anxiety. The cold water of the shower didn't help wake her up. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked pale, dark circles under her eyes. As she brushed her teeth, she kept glancing at her phone, half expecting it to ring again. But it sat still on the counter, quiet and unmoving. Allison tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a prank, some bored kids, or a random creep trying to mess with her. Still, it unnerved her. She couldn't figure out how they knew her name. She had lived in Ridgewater long enough to know her neighbors, and most of them were friendly but kept to themselves. Her life had been quiet ever since she and Josh split. It didn't make sense for someone to target her. On her way to work, the unease followed her. Every time her phone buzzed with a text or email, her heart leapt into her throat. But it was never another call, just the usual barrage of notifications from apps and spam emails. At work, her co-workers noticed something was off. Allison worked as an interior designer for a small local firm, and while it was usually a job she enjoyed, today her focus was completely shattered. Her friend and colleague, Lydia, approached her at lunch, concern etched on her face. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept at all," Lydia said, her eyes searching Allison's face for some clue of what was wrong. Allison hesitated, unsure of how to explain what had happened the night before. It sounded crazy when she thought about it. Someone calling her in the middle of the night, whispering her name, and then nothing. No proof, no evidence. Just her own shaken nerves. "I didn't sleep much," Allison admitted, glancing down at her half-eaten sandwich. "Got a weird phone call last night. Kinda creeped me out." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "What kind of phone call?" "Twice, actually. Both times, it was just someone whispering my name. I don't know who it was. The number didn't show up. It's probably nothing, but it freaked me out." Lydia frowned, leaning in a bit closer. "That's creepy. Did you report it?" Allison shrugged. "What would I report? It's just a phone call. They didn't say anything threatening." "Still, it's weird," Lydia said, a note of concern in her voice. "Maybe you should keep an eye on things. You never know with stuff like that. Some people are just off." The conversation left Allison with a strange feeling, like she was being watched, even though she knew that was irrational. The rest of the day passed in a blur, her mind always half on edge, waiting for another call. But it didn't come. The rest of the workday was uneventful, and by the time she got home, she had convinced herself it was just a prank. As the evening crept in, Allison tried to go about her night as usual. She put on some music, made herself a quick dinner, and settled on the couch with a book. But no matter how hard she tried to focus, her thoughts kept wandering back to the calls. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her phone, which she had placed on the coffee table in front of her, sat there like a ticking time bomb. She found herself staring at it, waiting. The anxiety gnawed at her, and soon, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the phone and opened her contacts, scrolling through her list. There was one person she could call, someone who might know how to help. Josh. It had been months since their breakup, and they hadn't spoken much since. But Josh had always been level-headed, and he'd know what to do. Maybe he could help her figure this out, even if it was just to calm her nerves. Her thumb hovered over his name for a moment before she sighed and closed the phone. No, she couldn't. Calling Josh would only reopen old wounds. Besides, it wasn't his problem anymore. Instead, she set her phone aside and tried to distract herself with a movie. The night passed in relative silence, and for a while, Allison began to relax. Maybe it really was just a one-off thing. Maybe whoever had called her had gotten bored and moved on. It was close to midnight when she decided to call it a night. As she climbed into bed, her phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart skipped a beat as she grabbed it from the nightstand. The message was from an unknown number. It simply read, "I'm watching you." Allison's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. This wasn't a prank. This was real. She didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. The next morning, Allison felt like she was operating on autopilot. Her body moved through the motions of getting ready, but her mind was trapped in a haze of fear. The message from the night before played over and over in her head. "I'm watching you." It felt like the words were tattooed on her brain, seeping into every thought she had. She didn't know what to do. Calling the police felt extreme, and what would she say? That someone sent her a creepy message? There was no threat, no specific danger she could point to, just a general, suffocating unease. The more she thought about it, the more trapped she felt. By the time she reached her car, her hands were trembling. She had to stop for a second, gripping the steering wheel tightly just to steady herself. The drive to work passed in a blur, her eyes darting to every car, every pedestrian. She had never felt so paranoid in her life. It was as though the entire world was watching her, conspiring against her. When she arrived at work, Lydia immediately noticed her disheveled state. Allison tried to brush off the questions, but Lydia wasn't buying it. She grabbed Allison's arm and pulled her into the break room, her face set with concern. "Allison, talk to me. What's going on?" Allison glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. She leaned in close and whispered, "I got another message last night, from an unknown number." Lydia's eyes widened. What did it say? Allison hesitated, her stomach twisting as she repeated the words aloud. It said, "I'm watching you." Lydia's face paled. "Okay, this is serious. You need to report this." "To whom?" Allison asked, her voice tight with frustration. "The police won't care about a couple of creepy messages. They'll say it's just a prank." Lydia shook her head. "It's not just a prank if someone's making you feel unsafe. At least file a report. And maybe stay somewhere else for a few days. Just to be safe." Allison sighed, the weight of it all pressing down on her. "Maybe you're right. I'll think about it." The rest of the day was a blur of half-finished tasks and anxious thoughts. She couldn't focus on anything for more than a few minutes before her mind wandered back to that message. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped into her throat, but there were no new messages, just the usual mundane notifications. By the time work ended, Allison was a bundle of nerves. She could feel the fear crawling under her skin, like an itch she couldn't scratch. She didn't want to go home, but she didn't know where else to go. Maybe Lydia was right. Maybe she needed to stay somewhere else, at least until she figured this out. But where? The only person she could think of was Josh, and that idea made her stomach churn. They hadn't ended things well, and the thought of showing up at his doorstep with this kind of baggage felt humiliating. Instead, Allison decided to stay out for a while. She went to a coffee shop, hoping that the busy atmosphere would help calm her nerves. She sat by the window, nursing a cup of coffee, her eyes scanning the street for anything suspicious. It felt ridiculous, like she was living in some kind of thriller movie. But the fear was real, and it was gnawing at her. As the evening dragged on, her phone buzzed again. Her heart skipped a beat as she grabbed it, but it was just a text from Lydia, checking in on her. "How are you holding up? Call me if you need anything." Allison typed out a quick response, reassuring Lydia that she was fine. even though she didn't believe it herself. She stared at the phone for a moment before making a decision. She opened her contacts and hovered over Josh's name again. Her thumb trembled as she hit call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Just as she was about to hang up, Josh's voice came through the line. "Allison?" He sounded surprised. "Is everything okay?" Allison hesitated, unsure of how to start. "Hey Josh, I know it's been a while, but I need to talk to someone. Something weird has been happening." There was a pause on the other end, and she could hear Josh shift, as if he was sitting up straighter. "What's going on?" Allison took a deep breath and explained everything. The calls, the messages, the creeping feeling that someone was watching her. As she talked, the fear that had been bubbling inside her finally spilled over. She found herself choking up, her voice shaking. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then, Josh's voice came through, calm but firm. "That's not just a prank, Allison. You need to report this, and you shouldn't stay at your place alone. Come over tonight. You can crash here." Allison's chest tightened. It felt strange, going to Josh for help after everything that had happened between them. But right now, she didn't have anyone else. She couldn't face another night alone, waiting for the phone to ring or the next message to come through. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come over." Josh gave her his address. It wasn't far, just a few miles from where she was. She felt a small flicker of relief as she got into her car and started driving. Maybe this was the right thing to do. Maybe Josh could help her figure this out. But as she pulled onto Josh's street, a cold chill ran down her spine. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She hesitated for a moment before glancing down at the screen. Another message from the unknown number. "I told you, Allison. I'm watching you." Her heart stopped. She glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone behind her. But the street was empty, quiet. Allison's hands trembled as she parked the car in front of Josh's house. She stared at the message, dread sinking into her bones. Whoever this was, they knew exactly where she was. Allison sat in her car, paralyzed with fear. The glow from her phone screen felt like a spotlight in the darkness, illuminating the terror that gripped her. Her mind raced with questions. How does this person know where I am? Are they watching me right now? She glanced around, scanning the shadows between the streetlights. Every parked car seemed menacing, every bush a potential hiding place. But there was no one in sight. The only sound was the soft hum of distant traffic, completely at odds with the storm of panic building inside her. Her phone buzzed again. The unknown number. This time, it was a single word: run. A shiver shot through her body. She wanted to flee, to drive far away from this place, from the eerie messages, from the creeping feeling that something was closing in on her. But where would she go? And how long could she outrun someone who seemed to know her every move? Her fingers shook as she locked the phone and grabbed her bag. The weight of dread hung over her like a heavy fog as she got out of the car and made her way to Josh's door. She hesitated for a moment, feeling exposed under the dim streetlights. A part of her wanted to turn back, but she couldn't stay out here. She rang the doorbell, each second feeling like an eternity. Footsteps echoed from inside the house, and the door swung open to reveal Josh. His face softened with concern when he saw her, the tension in his jaw relaxing slightly. "Allison, you okay?" he asked, stepping aside to let her in. She nodded, but her body betrayed her fear. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and her eyes darted around the room as if expecting something to jump out at her. "I got another message," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They said they're watching me. They told me to run." Josh's eyes widened, and his expression darkened. He closed the door firmly behind her and locked it, his hands moving with purpose. "This is serious, Allison. Whoever this is, they're not just messing with you. We need to figure this out." He led her into the living room, where the soft glow of a table lamp cast long shadows across the walls. Allison sank into the couch, her body heavy with exhaustion and fear. She watched as Josh paced back and forth, rubbing his temples. "Do you have any idea who it could be?" he asked, glancing at her. "Anyone you've had problems with lately? Anyone who might hold a grudge?" Allison shook her head, her mind racing through faces and names. "No one. I haven't had any issues with anyone. This came out of nowhere." Josh stopped pacing and sat down beside her, his brow furrowed in thought. We can go to the police, report the messages. Maybe they can trace the number, find out who's behind this. I don't know, Allison said, her voice wavering. What if they can't do anything? What if this person just disappears and starts again when I'm alone? Josh placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're not alone right now. We'll figure this out together. His words were comforting, but they didn't erase the gnawing fear that had taken root inside her. The thought of being stalked, of someone watching her every move, was suffocating. She felt like she was being hunted. The two sat in silence for a while, the tension in the room thick and oppressive. Josh finally stood and walked over to the window, pulling the curtains aside to peer out. I'll keep watch tonight. If anything suspicious happens, we'll call the police. Allison nodded, grateful for his presence. But deep down, she knew that no locked door or drawn curtain could keep out the terror that was following her. As the night stretched on, they tried to distract themselves with conversation, but every small noise from outside made her jump. Eventually, Josh offered to let her sleep in the guest room. It was small and cozy, with a single bed and a window overlooking the street. Allison hesitated, glancing out the window before closing the curtains tightly. Thanks, Josh, she said, forcing a weak smile. I appreciate it. He gave her a reassuring nod. Try to get some rest. I'll be right here if you need anything. Allison lay down on the bed, her heart still racing despite the quiet safety of the house. She stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching her even now. Sleep was a distant hope. An hour passed. Then two. Just as she was beginning to drift off, her phone buzzed on the nightstand, the sound like a gunshot in the silent room. She bolted upright, her heart pounding. She didn't want to look, didn't want to know what new terror awaited her. But she couldn't ignore it. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone and unlocked it. There was a new message from the unknown number. This time it was different. Not a threat, but something far more chilling. It was a photo of her, lying in Josh's guest room, the very bed she was in at that moment. Her eyes widened in horror as she stared at the image. The angle was perfect, as if taken from inside the room. Allison gasped, her breath catching in her throat as her heart threatened to burst from her chest. She frantically looked around the darkened room, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, but there was no one. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Sleep well, Allison. I'm closer than you think. Her scream shattered the night. Josh burst into the room within seconds of Allison's scream, his face pale with worry. He found her trembling on the edge of the bed, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. Her wide, terrified eyes met his, and she could barely form words. Josh, they took a picture of me while I was in this room. It's on my phone. She thrust the phone toward him, her hands still shaking. Josh took it carefully, staring at the image that had sent her into a panic. The picture was crystal clear, a shot of Allison, lying in the very bed she was sitting on now, as if someone had been standing in the corner of the room, watching her the whole time. He looked up, his face grim. Allison, no one's been in here. I've been awake. I've been watching the house. There's no way anyone could have come inside without me seeing. Then how do you explain this? Allison's voice cracked, tears of fear welling in her eyes. She felt cornered, hunted, like a helpless prey in some sick game. Her pulse thudded in her ears, and her skin prickled with the sensation that someone was still watching, still lurking nearby. Josh's jaw tightened. We need to call the police? Right now? Allison nodded, unable to think of any other option. They were out of their depth. Whoever this person was, they were more than just a prankster. They were someone who had crossed a line. As Josh dialed the number, pacing the room, Allison's mind raced. How long had this been going on? How could someone be this close without either of them knowing? Josh spoke briefly with the dispatcher, giving details of the situation. When he hung up, his face was filled with frustration. They're sending someone, but it might take a while. They're telling me to stay calm and lock the house. Allison's eyes darted to the window, as if expecting to see a face staring back at her through the glass. She couldn't shake the feeling that the stalker was still out there, just waiting for the right moment. Josh, I don't feel safe here, she whispered. What if they're watching us right now? What if they're inside? Josh moved quickly to check the doors and windows, locking each one with extra care. His movements were tense and methodical, but there was an underlying panic in his eyes that Allison had never seen before. It terrified her even more to see him scared. "We're going to be okay," he said, though it sounded more like he was trying to convince himself. "The police will be here soon." But Allison's gut told her that whoever this person was, they weren't afraid of the police. They wanted her to be scared, to feel powerless, and it was working. Hours seemed to crawl by as they sat in the living room, the silence suffocating. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside made Allison flinch. Josh stayed close by her side, his face taut with concentration, his eyes flicking to the windows and the door every few seconds. Finally, there was a knock at the door. Josh jumped up, and Allison's heart skipped a beat. "It's the police," Josh said after peeking through the peephole. Relief washed over Allison, but it was fleeting. The officer, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a calm demeanor, entered and listened carefully as they explained everything. The messages, the photos, the sense of being watched. The officer's brow furrowed as he took notes. "You've done the right thing by calling us. This sounds like someone is using sophisticated means to monitor you. Could be a hacker, someone with access to your phone or devices." Allison's stomach dropped. "You mean someone could be watching through my phone?" The officer nodded. "It's possible. We've seen cases where people gain access to cameras on phones or laptops without the victim knowing. I'll need to take your phone for evidence. We can run a check to see if there's any spyware or malicious software installed." The thought of her phone, her private messages, her photos, all being accessed by someone, sent a wave of revulsion through her. She handed the phone over to the officer, feeling even more vulnerable without it. "We'll also sweep the area," the officer continued. "See if there's anything suspicious outside the house. In the meantime, try to stay calm. We'll do everything we can to get to the bottom of this." The officer stepped outside, and Allison collapsed onto the couch, feeling drained. Josh sat beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. "We'll figure this out, Al. They'll catch this guy." But deep down, Allison wasn't so sure. This person had already gotten too close, known too much. How could they ever feel safe again? After what felt like an eternity, the officer returned. His face was grim, and that made Allison's heart sink. "We didn't find anything obvious," he said, glancing around the room. "No signs of forced entry, no unusual footprints or disturbances outside. But we'll keep an eye on the area, patrol the neighborhood. In the meantime, I suggest you both stay somewhere else for a few days, just to be safe." Allison nodded numbly. Where could she go that this person couldn't find her? They seemed to know her every move. As the officer left, Josh grabbed a bag and began packing. "You can stay at my parents' cabin. It's out of the city, in the woods. No one would find us there." Allison hesitated. The idea of being alone, in the middle of nowhere, both terrified and comforted her. But at least it was somewhere this person wouldn't expect. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's go." They packed in silence, both lost in their thoughts. The ride to the cabin was long, winding through dark forest roads that only heightened Allison's anxiety. She glanced at her reflection in the window, half expecting to see someone watching her from the trees. Finally, they arrived at the secluded cabin. It was small but cozy, surrounded by dense woods. Josh unlocked the door and flicked on the lights, illuminating the rustic interior. The silence outside was deafening, but at least here, there were no buzzing phones, no strange messages, no pictures of her in bed. For the first time in days, Allison felt like she could breathe. But as they settled in for the night, the wind outside began to howl, rattling the windows and whispering through the trees. It sounded like voices, like someone calling her name. She shook her head, trying to shake off the feeling. It was just her mind playing tricks on her. But then, from outside the cabin, came a faint, unmistakable sound. A phone buzzing. Allison froze, her blood running cold. It wasn't hers. Her phone was with the police. She looked at Josh, but he hadn't moved. The buzzing continued, persistent, coming from somewhere just beyond the cabin walls. With a sinking feeling, she realized they had never been alone. Allison's heart thudded in her chest as she sat motionless on the couch, straining her ears. The persistent buzzing was faint but undeniable, carried by the wind. Josh hadn't seemed to notice, his eyes fixed on the fire they had just lit in the small cabin's fireplace. "Josh," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. Her voice was tight with fear. "Do you hear that?" Josh turned, a puzzled look on his face. "Hear what?" "That buzzing. It sounds like a phone," she said, her voice trembling. She motioned toward the window, her eyes wide with dread. Josh got up slowly, listening, and then he heard it too, a soft, intermittent buzzing like a phone vibrating on silent mode. But the sound wasn't coming from inside the cabin. It was coming from outside, from somewhere in the woods. Allison's breathing quickened. "It's out there. Someone's out there." Josh's expression darkened, and he grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen counter. "Stay here," he ordered, though there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. "I'm going to check it out." "No." Allison grabbed his arm, her eyes pleading. "You can't go out there alone. What if it's him?" Josh paused, his jaw clenched. "We can't just sit here and do nothing. I won't go far. I'll just check to see if anyone's around. If I see anything suspicious, I'll come right back." Against her better judgment, Allison let him go, her stomach churning with dread as she watched him step out into the cold night. The door creaked shut behind him, leaving her alone with the eerie silence of the cabin. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the trees, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist ominously on the walls. Allison wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stave off the creeping sense of unease. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity. Then the buzzing stopped. Dead silence filled the air, broken only by the faint crackling of the fire. Allison's nerves were frayed. She leaned closer to the window, trying to spot any sign of movement through the darkness. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Allison jumped, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. Josh stood there, his face pale and tense. "Allison, there's no one out there," he said, his voice shaky. "But I found something." He held up a phone. It was old, a little scratched, but functional. The screen was dark, but the sight of it made Allison's blood run cold. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Josh hesitated, his eyes darting toward the window. It was lying on the ground, just past the edge of the woods. "But that's not all." Allison's throat tightened. "What else?" Josh took a deep breath, then turned the phone screen toward her. There was a photo on it, a fresh one. The image was of her and Josh, sitting by the fire in the cabin. "Taken just minutes ago." Allison gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "How is that possible? There's no one here." "I don't know," Josh muttered, his voice low. "But someone's been watching us, even here." The walls of the cabin seemed to close in on Allison as the terror settled deep in her bones. No matter where they went, no matter how far they fled, this person was always one step ahead, always lurking just beyond their reach. "We need to leave. Now," Allison said, her voice urgent. She grabbed her jacket and started throwing their belongings into a bag, her movements frantic. "We can't stay here. They're watching us." Josh nodded, but as he opened the door to the cabin, something caught his eye, a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the woods. Allison froze when she saw it too. The figure didn't move, didn't come closer. It simply stood there, watching. For a long moment, they stared back at it, hearts pounding, paralyzed by fear. Then, with deliberate slowness, the figure raised its hand and pointed directly at them. Allison's breath caught in her throat. "Josh, we're leaving." "No." They bolted from the cabin, jumping into the car without a second thought. Josh started the engine, and they tore down the narrow dirt road, the cabin and the figure quickly disappearing in the rearview mirror. For miles, they drove in silence, both too terrified to speak. Allison kept looking over her shoulder, half expecting the figure to be following them, always just out of sight. Finally, when they were far from the cabin, Josh pulled over on the side of the road, his hands trembling as he turned off the engine. "We need to go to the police again," he said, breathing heavily. "Whoever this is, they're not going to stop." Allison nodded, still shaken. But something gnawed at her, an unsettling feeling that even the police wouldn't be able to help them. "Josh, how did they find us?" "We didn't tell anyone we were going to the cabin." Josh looked at her, his face as pale as hers. I don't know, but they knew. Allison shuddered, the fear gripping her tighter. We're never going to escape this, are we? Josh didn't answer. He just stared ahead, his jaw clenched, as the darkness stretched endlessly before them. And somewhere, far behind, a phone buzzed again in the night. The ride back to town was filled with a tense, suffocating silence. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, shrouded in darkness, while the unsettling feeling that they were still being watched gnawed at Allison. Every rustle of the wind, every flicker of the trees outside the car windows, sent a shiver down her spine. It was as though the woods themselves were alive, whispering their secrets to whoever was listening. Josh gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white from the pressure. He hadn't said a word since they left the cabin, but the grim expression on his face made it clear that he was just as rattled as Allison. Something wasn't right, and they both knew it. Allison's phone buzzed again, causing her to jump. She fumbled to pull it out of her pocket, her hands shaking. It was another message, and this time, she hesitated to open it. Who is it? Josh asked, glancing at her quickly before returning his eyes to the road. Allison swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her ears as she opened the message. Her stomach dropped. It was another photo, this time of the two of them driving. The image was taken from the woods, as if someone had been watching them as they sped away from the cabin. They're still watching us, she whispered, her voice trembling. She showed the photo to Josh, who cursed under his breath. This is insane. How can they know where we are? Even now, Josh asked, his voice rising with frustration. Allison had no answer. She stared at the photo, her mind racing, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. How could someone be following them so closely? Was there a tracker on the car? Had they been bugged somehow? We need to think logically, Josh said, taking a deep breath as he tried to calm himself. There has to be some explanation. Maybe we're overreacting. Maybe it's just a prank. A prank? Allison scoffed, her voice thick with disbelief. A prank doesn't explain how they knew we were at the cabin, or the photos, or the phone that just appeared out of nowhere. Josh clenched his jaw, his frustration growing. I know, but what else could it be? What kind of person would go to these lengths just to mess with us? Before Allison could respond, another buzz interrupted her thoughts. It wasn't her phone this time. It was the old phone Josh had found in the woods. Both of them froze, staring at the phone like it was a ticking time bomb. Slowly, Josh reached for it, his hand trembling as he picked it up. The screen lit up with an incoming message. Josh swiped it open, his eyes widening as he read the text aloud. Turn around. Allison's blood turned to ice. What? The phone buzzed again, another message popping up. You forgot something. Allison's mind raced. What could they have possibly forgotten? The thought of returning to the cabin, of facing whoever, or whatever, was out there, filled her with dread. Josh shook his head. We're not going back. I don't care what they say. But the phone buzzed a third time. This time, the message was more threatening. Turn around, or I'll come to you. Allison's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Josh, her mind screaming with panic. They couldn't just keep running. Whoever this was, they were clearly one step ahead. It didn't matter how far they drove, or how fast they went. This person would always find them. We can't keep running, Allison said, her voice barely audible. We need to figure out who this is, and why they're doing this. Josh exhaled sharply, his grip tightening on the phone. I know, but what do? We can't just walk back into a trap. Allison thought for a moment. Then an idea struck her. What if we didn't go back to the cabin? What if we went somewhere else? Somewhere they wouldn't expect. Josh frowned, unsure of where she was going with this. Like where? Allison hesitated. The woods. The area where you found the phone. Maybe there's something there. Something they don't want us to find. Josh looked at her, his face filled with uncertainty. You want to go deeper into the woods? After everything we've just been through? Allison nodded, though the fear in her chest was palpable. It's the only way we'll ever get answers. If we don't do something, they'll keep tormenting us no matter where we go. Josh was silent for a long moment, weighing their options. Then, with a resigned sigh, he turned the car around, heading back toward the cabin. But this time, they weren't going back inside. The drive was agonizingly slow, each mile dragging them closer to the heart of the unknown. The once familiar road seemed more sinister in the dark, and every shadow felt like it was concealing something lurking just out of sight. When they reached the cabin's driveway, Josh turned off the headlights, and they quietly parked at the edge of the woods. The trees loomed above them like towering sentinels, their branches swaying in the wind. The faint rustling of leaves sounded eerily like whispers. They stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at their skin as they cautiously made their way into the woods. Josh led the way, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but even that small light felt inadequate against the looming threat of the unknown. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the buzzing started again, not from the phone in Josh's hand, but from somewhere ahead of them. The sound grew louder with each step they took, leading them like a beacon. Allison's heart raced. Whatever they were about to find, it wasn't going to be good. Finally, they reached a small clearing. In the middle of it, half buried in the dirt, was something Allison hadn't expected. A second phone. Josh knelt down, brushing the dirt away to reveal its cracked screen. It was still buzzing, even though the battery seemed impossibly low. "I think this is what they meant," Josh muttered, glancing around nervously. Allison stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the phone. But before she could say anything, the buzzing stopped. And then a voice, low, distorted, and unmistakably real, whispered from behind them. "You shouldn't have come back." They turned in unison, their hearts hammering in their chests. The figure that had been watching them from the woods earlier now stood just feet away, its face shrouded in darkness. The figure standing before them blended into the shadows of the trees, its silhouette barely visible in the dim light of the clearing. Allison's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding so loudly that it drowned out every other sound around her. She felt rooted to the spot, unable to move, as if fear itself had turned her legs to stone. Josh, however, was quicker to react. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking but firm. He stepped in front of Allison protectively, his flashlight beam aimed at the figure. For a moment, there was only silence. The figure remained still, its face obscured by the hood of a dark jacket. Then, in a voice that sent chills racing down Allison's spine, it spoke again. "I warned you not to come back." The voice was low and gravelly, distorted by some unseen force. It was neither male nor female, but something in between, a voice that belonged nowhere and everywhere. "Why are you doing this?" Allison managed to choke out, finding her voice despite the terror that threatened to overwhelm her. "What do you want from us?" The figure took a step closer, and Allison instinctively moved back. Josh, too, tensed, his hand gripping the flashlight so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You took something that doesn't belong to you," the figure said, its tone sharp and accusatory. "Now, you must pay the price." Allison's mind raced. What had they taken? The phone? The eerie message had led them here. But they had no idea what this stranger meant by something that doesn't belong. Everything they had found seemed random, like pieces of a puzzle they couldn't solve. "We don't understand," Josh said, his voice louder now, tinged with desperation. "What did we take? We don't want any trouble. We just want to know what's going on." Another tense silence followed. The figure seemed to consider Josh's words for a moment, then finally raised a hand, pointing at the second phone that Josh had uncovered from the dirt. "You found the key," the figure rasped. "It was never meant to be found." Allison looked down at the cracked phone lying in the dirt. "The phone? This is what you want?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, it took another slow step forward, closing the distance between them. Its presence was suffocating, like a void that swallowed all warmth and light from the world around them. The darkness seemed to press in, heavier and colder, as though the forest itself was complicit in whatever malevolent force had brought them here. "Leave the phone and go," the figure hissed. "If you value your lives, do not look back. Do not speak of this to anyone." Josh's face hardened. "And if we don't?" The figures had shifted slightly, revealing just enough of its face to show pale skin and dark, hollow eyes that seemed devoid of life or humanity. When it spoke again, its voice was a barely audible whisper, but the threat was unmistakable. "Then you will never leave this forest." The weight of those words hit Allison like a physical blow. She wanted to leave, wanted to turn around and run as far and as fast as she could, but something kept her frozen in place. Some strange, irrational urge to understand why this was happening to them. "Why us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this to us?" The figure's lips curled into a chilling smile, though there was no warmth in it. "You shouldn't have come looking for answers." Josh turned to her, his expression conflicted. They had been drawn into something far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. But walking away now, without answers, would leave them haunted by what they'd experienced, never knowing the truth. Allison, however, could feel the cold creeping into her bones, a darkness settling in her mind that made her want to obey, to drop everything and run. Whoever, or whatever, this figure was, it wasn't playing by any rules they understood. "Let's leave," she whispered to Josh, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. "Please, let's just go." Josh hesitated, his jaw clenching as he weighed their options. But in the end, he nodded. He bent down, placing the second phone back where he had found it, half buried in the earth. "We're leaving," Josh said, his voice laced with frustration. He stepped backward, never taking his eyes off the figure. Allison followed suit, her heart racing, afraid to turn her back on the hooded figure looming in the darkness. The woods seemed to come alive with every step they took, the wind intensifying, the trees creaking as if groaning under the weight of their dark secret. Finally, when they reached the edge of the clearing, Allison dared to glance back over her shoulder. The figure was gone. Without a word, they hurried back to the car, the tension between them thick and suffocating. The moment they were inside, Josh started the engine, and they sped away, the headlights cutting through the dense trees as they fled the scene. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The weight of what had just happened hung heavily in the air, a suffocating presence that neither of them could shake. It wasn't until they were halfway back to town that Josh finally broke the silence. "Do you think we're safe now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Allison stared out the window, the dark trees whipping past them, her mind still reeling from the encounter. She wanted to believe that they were, that leaving the phone behind had somehow freed them from whatever nightmare they had stumbled into. But deep down, she knew the truth. They had uncovered something dark and dangerous, something that wouldn't be so easily left behind. And as the wind howled outside the car, whispering its secrets to the trees, Allison couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched, that this wasn't over. Not yet. As they drove through the winding roads leading back to town, the tension inside the car was palpable. The forest receded behind them, but Allison couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every glance in the rearview mirror sent a chill down her spine, as though at any moment, she'd see that hooded figure standing silently on the road behind them. Josh kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his knuckles still white from gripping the steering wheel. The silence between them was thick, oppressive, and filled with unspoken fears. Neither of them knew how to process what had just happened, but Allison could feel the weight of the encounter pressing down on her, crushing her thoughts into fragmented, incoherent pieces. Finally, she broke the silence. "What do we do now?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might summon something from the darkness. Josh didn't answer immediately. He swallowed hard, keeping his eyes on the road, and then shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice strained. "But we can't just pretend this didn't happen." Allison leaned back in her seat, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped her arms around herself. The cold still lingered in her bones, a residue of whatever malevolent presence had been in that clearing. She replayed the hooded figure's words over and over in her mind. "You took something that doesn't belong to you." What did it mean? The phone? Or was it something deeper, something tied to the eerie messages they had received? None of it made sense, and yet, the terror that had gripped her in that moment was all too real. She could still feel the cold, hollow eyes of the figure watching her, judging her. Josh glanced over at her, his face filled with uncertainty. "Do you think we're really in danger? Like, serious danger?" Allison didn't know how to answer. She wanted to tell him that it was all over, that they were safe now that they had left the phone behind. But the truth was, she wasn't sure. The forest, the figure, the phone, none of it felt like it belonged in the normal world. It was as if they had stumbled into a nightmare that was just waiting to follow them home. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I don't think we can just forget about it." Josh nodded, his jaw clenching. "Maybe we should tell someone," he suggested. "Like the police. They could look into it, right?" Allison wasn't so sure. What would they even say? That they found a creepy old phone in the woods, and some hooded stranger told them they had taken something that didn't belong to them? It sounded insane, and she wasn't convinced anyone would believe them, especially when they couldn't explain why they had gone to the woods in the first place. "We don't have any proof," she said quietly, "and we don't even know who that person was. What if they come after us for telling?" Josh let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I thought of that too," he admitted. "But we can't just sit around waiting for something to happen. What if we're not safe? What if that thing, whatever it was, follows us home?" The thought sent another chill down Allison's spine. She looked out the window, her eyes scanning the darkness as if expecting to see something lurking in the trees. The night felt alive, pulsing with unseen threats. She couldn't shake the feeling that they had set something in motion, something that couldn't be undone. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I just want this to be over." Josh reached over and squeezed her hand gently, his touch warm and reassuring despite the fear that gripped them both. "We'll figure it out," he promised. "We'll stick together, okay?" Allison nodded, though her heart still raced with anxiety. Sticking together was all they could do for now. But deep down, she wondered if it would be enough. As they approached the outskirts of town, the familiar streets and buildings coming into view, Allison felt a small sense of relief. The lights, the people, it all felt so normal, so safe compared to the eerie woods they had left behind. But even as they drove past the quiet houses and closed shops, a nagging thought kept gnawing at the back of her mind. What if the nightmare wasn't over? Josh pulled into the driveway of her house and shut off the engine. The car fell into a tense silence, neither of them moving to get out. Allison stared at her house, its dark windows reflecting the streetlights like empty eyes. She had always felt safe here, but now, the thought of going inside filled her with unease. "I'll stay with you tonight," Josh said, breaking the silence. "Just in case." Allison nodded, grateful for his presence, even though she wasn't sure how much it would help. She opened the car door and stepped out, the cool night air washing over her. Josh followed, and together they made their way up the path to her front door, their footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness. Once inside, they locked the door behind them and stood in the quiet living room, the weight of the evening still heavy in the air. Allison flicked on the lights, hoping the brightness would chase away the lingering fear, but it only made the silence more oppressive. "I'll take the couch," Josh said, dropping his bag near the door. "You should try to get some rest." Allison hesitated. Sleep seemed impossible after everything that had happened, but she knew she needed to try. Her mind was exhausted, and her body ached with tension. "Okay," she agreed reluctantly, "but wake me up if you hear anything. I don't care how small it is." Josh gave her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I will." She turned and headed upstairs, her footsteps slow and heavy. Each step felt like a monumental effort, the events of the night weighing her down. When she reached her bedroom, she closed the door softly behind her and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror across the room. She looked tired, pale, almost like a ghost of herself. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, and it made her stomach turn. What have we gotten ourselves into? With a sigh, she lay down on the bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. She closed her eyes, willing herself to fall asleep. But even as her body relaxed, her mind refused to quiet down. Outside, the wind began to pick up, rattling the windows and whispering through the trees. It was the same wind that had followed them from the woods. And as Allison lay there in the darkness, she couldn't help but feel that they weren't alone. Not anymore. Allison drifted into a fitful sleep, her dreams tangled with images of the hooded figure from the woods. Dark, shadowy hands reached for her as whispers filled the air, too faint to understand but filled with menace. The feeling of being watched was relentless, and no matter how far she ran in the dream, she couldn't escape. Suddenly, her eyes snapped open. She was back in her room, the familiar surroundings offering little comfort as her heart pounded in her chest. It took a moment to realize what had woken her, but then she heard it, a faint tapping at her window. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was barely noticeable over the rustling wind outside, but it was steady, insistent, as if something or someone was trying to get her attention. Allison lay frozen in her bed, staring at the window across the room, dreading what she might see if she looked. The room was silent, save for the wind and the tapping. She could feel the fear creeping back, cold and unrelenting, wrapping itself around her like a suffocating blanket. What if the figure from the woods had followed her home? What if it was standing there, just outside, watching her? Tap, tap, tap. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to convince herself that it was just a branch against the glass, that there was nothing to be afraid of. But the rhythm of the tapping was too deliberate, too precise to be anything natural. Gathering all the courage she could muster, Allison slowly sat up in bed. Her legs felt like lead as she swung them over the edge and stood, her body trembling with fear. The room felt colder than before, the air heavy with something she couldn't quite name. She took a few hesitant steps toward the window, her heart pounding louder with each movement. The tapping continued, steady and persistent, and as she neared the window, she could see the dark silhouette of something, or someone, on the other side. Allison's breath caught in her throat. She stood frozen in place, just a few feet from the window, her eyes locked on the shadowy figure. It wasn't moving, but she could feel its presence, a cold, unnatural energy radiating through the glass. For a moment, she thought about waking Josh, but some part of her, a deep, primal part, told her that she needed to face this alone. With trembling hands, she reached for the curtain, her fingers brushing the fabric. She hesitated, her mind racing with the possibilities of what she might see if she pulled it back. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was louder now, more urgent, and she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. With a quick breath, she yanked the curtain aside, her eyes wide with fear. The window was empty. There was no one there. Allison blinked, her heart still racing as she stared out into the night. The backyard was empty, the trees swaying gently in the wind. The moonlight bathed the grass in a soft, silvery glow, but there was no sign of the figure she had been so sure was there. She pressed her hand to the glass, her breath fogging up the window as she leaned closer, scanning the yard for any movement. But it was still, eerily still. For a brief moment, she felt a wave of relief. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe the fear from earlier had clouded her senses and made her see things that weren't there. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it, a faint reflection in the glass. Allison's heart stopped as her eyes locked onto the reflection behind her. Standing just a few feet away, at the foot of her bed, was a figure cloaked in shadows. Its face was hidden, but she could feel its gaze on her, cold and piercing. She spun around, her body tensing for a scream, but the room was empty. The figure was gone, as if it had never been there. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she backed away from the window, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. She glanced around the room, her eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, but there was no sign of the figure. Was it real, or was she losing her mind? The tapping had stopped, but the room still felt heavy, oppressive, as if something lingered just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Allison stumbled toward the door, desperate to get out of the room, to find Josh and make sure she wasn't alone. She reached for the doorknob, her fingers trembling as she turned it and yanked the door open. Josh was already standing in the hallway, his face pale and drawn. He looked just as terrified as she felt. "You heard it too?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Allison nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She stepped out of the room, grateful to be away from the window, from whatever had been there, or still was. Josh ran a hand through his hair, his eyes wide with fear. "I thought I heard something, someone tapping on the windows downstairs. I went to check, but there was no one there." Allison shuddered, her mind racing. "I saw something," she whispered, her voice shaking. "In my room. It was standing right behind me, but when I turned around, it was gone." Josh's face paled even more, and he glanced down the hallway toward the stairs. "What the hell is happening?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. This can't be real. It just can't. Allison swallowed hard, her fear bubbling up into panic. I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. But whatever it is, it's not over. Not yet. The tapping had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. It was a silence filled with anticipation, with the knowledge that something was still out there, waiting. And this time, it wasn't going to let them go so easily. If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Let's begin the next story. The night draped the small town of Elmsworth in a shroud of tranquility, but something in the air sent shivers down Ethan Monroe's spine. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying echoes of untold stories, while the stars twinkled like curious eyes in the vast black sky. It was a typical autumn night, yet for Ethan, this night would be anything but ordinary. At 28, Ethan was an artist, known for his vivid landscapes and haunting portraits. His cozy studio apartment, nestled in an old brick building, was adorned with canvases that mirrored the tumultuous emotions he often felt. That evening, he had been working late, lost in a world of color and shadow, unaware of the encroaching darkness outside. As he finally set his brush down, exhaustion weighed heavy on him. He glanced at the clock, 3:12 a.m. A wave of fatigue washed over him, compelling him to crawl into bed. The soft rustling of leaves outside and the distant hoot of an owl lulled him to sleep. But sleep wasn't meant to last long. A sharp noise jolted him awake. Ethan's heart raced as he opened his eyes to the dim light filtering through the curtains. His mind was still hazy from sleep, but a creeping sensation told him something was off. He lay still, straining to hear the sound again. It was faint, like the soft patter of footsteps, or perhaps a whisper. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. A shadow loomed beside his bed, indistinct and dark, contrasting sharply with the pale light of the moon filtering through the window. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat, fear gripping him. The shadow stood motionless, its shape shifting slightly as if it were breathing. Instinctively, he wanted to reach for his phone, to illuminate the room and chase away this phantasm. But his body was frozen, locked in a battle between fear and disbelief. Was this a trick of the mind? A remnant of a dream that refused to fade? The shadow didn't move. It simply stood there watching. A cold sweat broke out on Ethan's forehead as his mind raced with questions. What was it? He wanted to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. Instead, he lay there, staring into the dark, waiting for the shadow to reveal itself or dissolve back into the night. A rush of memories flooded his mind. The stories his grandmother had told him about spirits and shadows that roamed the earth, lingering near those who were sensitive to their presence. Could this be one of those tales come to life? Or was it merely a figment of his overactive imagination, fueled by fatigue and fear? As he finally found the courage to turn his head, the shadow flickered for a moment, its edges blurring as if it were made of smoke. Ethan blinked, and in that split second, it vanished. The emptiness of his room felt oppressive, silence enveloping him like a thick fog. Heart pounding, Ethan sat up, determined to dismiss the experience as a trick of his mind. But deep down, a gnawing feeling told him that something was very wrong. Shadows, after all, often conceal secrets, and this night was only just beginning to unravel its mysteries. The following day dawned, yet the lingering sensation of unease clung to Ethan like a stubborn fog. The sunlight poured into his studio, casting long beams across the wooden floor, but it failed to penetrate the shadows of his restless night. As he sipped his morning coffee, the familiar aroma failed to bring him comfort. Instead, it only amplified his anxiety, making him acutely aware of every creak and groan of the old building around him. Ethan tried to shake off the remnants of fear, attributing his bizarre experience to fatigue and perhaps a touch of sleep paralysis. After all, he had read about it extensively, how the mind can play tricks during the fragile state between wakefulness and sleep. However, as the day wore on, he couldn't help but notice peculiarities in his surroundings that he had previously overlooked. His art supplies seemed to be in a constant state of disarray. Brushes that he was sure he had placed in their designated holder were now scattered across his desk. Tubes of paint lay inexplicably open, their contents oozing onto the surface below. At first, he dismissed these oddities as mere forgetfulness. But the feeling that something was amiss festered beneath the surface, gnawing at his sanity. When he ventured outside for a breath of fresh air, the neighborhood felt oddly still, as if the world was holding its breath. The familiar sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves were replaced by an unsettling silence. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant life that usually buzzed around him. Even the other residents of the building seemed to be avoiding eye contact, their expressions clouded with unspoken fears. Determined to brush off his growing paranoia, Ethan decided to visit the local library, seeking refuge in the stacks of books and the comforting presence of literature. The scent of aged paper and ink enveloped him as he wandered through the aisles. He hoped that diving into a story would clear his mind. While perusing the horror section, a book caught his eye, Shadows of the Unknown, Tales of Terror and Intrigue. Intrigued, he pulled it from the shelf. The cover featured a silhouette of a figure cloaked in darkness, a haunting image that stirred something deep within him. Flipping through the pages, he stumbled upon a chapter discussing shadow figures, entities said to haunt the living, often appearing in times of emotional turmoil or distress. His heart raced as he read on. According to the book, these shadows were often associated with feelings of dread and were believed to be manifestations of one's fears. Ethan closed the book abruptly, shoving it back onto the shelf, feeling as though he had just stumbled upon forbidden knowledge. Was this what he had experienced last night? As he walked back home, the streets felt claustrophobic, each passing car and pedestrian casting elongated shadows that seemed to reach out toward him. Ethan's thoughts raced, intertwining the tales of shadow figures with his own reality. Could it be that he had unwittingly invited something sinister into his life? Upon arriving at his apartment, Ethan found it difficult to shake the feeling of being watched. He hurried to his studio, desperately trying to focus on his painting. Yet, the colors on the canvas felt muted, lacking the vibrancy he was known for. Each stroke of the brush felt heavier, as if the weight of his fear was seeping into his art. Suddenly, a noise pierced the silence, an inexplicable thud coming from the back of the studio. Ethan's heart dropped, and he froze. The sound echoed in the stillness, reverberating through his bones. Summoning his courage, he walked toward the source of the noise. He found himself in front of the large, old wardrobe that stood against the wall. It had been a family heirloom, a relic passed down through generations, but lately, it felt more like a portal to the unknown. The door stood ajar, creaking gently as though inviting him to peer inside. With a hesitant hand, he reached for the handle, his pulse quickening. Was it mere paranoia, or was there truly something hidden within? With a deep breath, he swung the door open, revealing nothing but the musty scent of forgotten clothing and old memories. But there, nestled between an old coat and a box of trinkets, lay an object that made his breath hitch. A small, ornate mirror, its surface clouded with dust. As Ethan lifted the mirror from its resting place, he noticed that the frame was intricately carved with patterns that seemed to dance in the light. The glass, however, was peculiar. It felt almost alive, rippling like the surface of a disturbed pond. He wiped the dust away with his sleeve, and as he gazed into it, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him. The reflection staring back was not just his own. It felt as though the mirror was showing him a glimpse into another world. The unsettling atmosphere thickened around him, and Ethan stumbled back, the mirror clattering to the floor. He watched as it shattered, shards scattering across the wooden surface. The pieces gleamed ominously, and for a brief moment, he swore he saw a figure lurking within the fragmented glass, a shadow that flickered and faded before he could blink. Ethan sank to the floor, heart racing, as a cold realization began to settle in. The shadow from last night was not just a figment of his imagination. It was a harbinger of something far more sinister. And it was only the beginning. Ethan sat amidst the shards of the broken mirror, the atmosphere thick with an unnerving silence. Each piece reflected not only his startled expression, but also the chaos that had begun to consume him. With trembling hands, he picked up a shard, its sharp edge glinting ominously in the dim light. He couldn't shake the feeling that this fragment held more than just a reflection. It contained a sliver of the mystery that had entwined itself around him. Determined to uncover the truth behind the shadow and the shattered mirror, Ethan cleared the remnants from the floor and set to work. He grabbed a notebook and a pen, a tool he often used for sketching and jotting down ideas. But this time, it would serve a different purpose, a detective's log. He would catalog everything strange and unsettling that had happened since that fateful night. His first entry detailed the encounter with the shadow, the fear that had gripped him, and the eerie sensation of being watched. He wrote about the disarray in his studio and the unsettling silence in the town, trying to piece together the threads of an unfolding mystery. Ethan spent the next few hours compiling a list of odd occurrences that had slipped through his mind like water through fingers. The shadows that danced in the corners of his room, the strange noises that crept in from the outside, and now, the shattered mirror, all signs that something was amiss. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the room, Ethan felt a chill creep over him. He glanced at the time, 6:45 p.m. The dusk deepened, painting the world outside in shades of gray and blue. But inside his apartment, the shadows seemed to grow darker, more pronounced. Deciding to take a break, he stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The air felt electric, charged with an unknown energy. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, anticipating something. Ethan wandered the streets, searching for anything that might provide clues about the shadow that haunted him. He stopped at the local bookstore, hoping to find more literature on the supernatural or folklore surrounding shadows. The bell chimed as he entered, and the comforting scent of paper and ink enveloped him. He made his way to the back, where an elderly woman sat behind the counter, her silver hair framing her kind face. "Looking for something specific, dear?" she asked, her voice gentle yet probing. "I'm interested in shadows and folklore," Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone casual, though his heart raced at the thought of sharing his fears. The woman's eyes twinkled with an understanding that made him uneasy. "Ah, shadows can hold many secrets. Let me show you a few titles that might interest you." She led him to a section filled with books on local legends, ghost stories, and paranormal phenomena. Ethan's fingers trailed over the spines of the books until one caught his eye, Whispers in the Dark, The Haunting History of Elmsworth. The title sent a shiver down his spine, but he felt compelled to read it. He grabbed the book and thanked the woman, leaving the store with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Once back in his apartment, he sank into his worn armchair, the weight of the book resting heavily on his lap. He flipped through the pages, absorbing stories of hauntings and shadow figures that roamed the town throughout its history. Each tale resonated with an eerie familiarity, tugging at the strings of his own experience. One story, in particular, piqued his interest, a legend of a shadowy figure that appeared to those on the brink of despair, drawing them into a world of darkness. The figure was said to thrive on fear, growing stronger with each encounter. The more Ethan read, the more he felt a chilling connection to his own situation. As he neared the end of the chapter, he stumbled upon a passage that mentioned a peculiar phenomenon, the presence of mirrors in homes that had witnessed tragedy. It was said that mirrors acted as portals, allowing shadows to seep through and manifest in the physical world. Ethan's heart raced. Could the shattered mirror have been a gateway for the shadow that had visited him? His thoughts spiraled as he realized that the broken mirror was no ordinary object. It was a conduit, a channel between worlds, one that could be reopened if he wasn't careful. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through his apartment, causing him to jump from his seat. Heart pounding, Ethan glanced around the room, searching for the source. The sound had come from his studio, an ominous reminder that he was not alone. He stood cautiously, apprehension prickling his skin. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to swirl, coiling around him like smoke. As he approached the studio, the unease deepened. The feeling of being watched returned, heavier now, almost suffocating. When he entered the room, he was struck by a chilling sight. The remaining pieces of the mirror had shifted. They now formed a small circle on the floor, reflecting a twisted, distorted version of the room. The colors danced erratically, and within the glass, he thought he glimpsed a figure, darker than the shadows surrounding him. "Enough!" Ethan shouted, trying to banish his fear. This ends now. He couldn't let the shadow take hold of him. He needed to confront it, to understand what it wanted. Grabbing his phone, he began to research ways to cleanse spaces of unwanted energies. The light from the screen cast a warm glow in the otherwise dim room, a stark contrast to the encroaching darkness. As he browsed through articles, he found a suggestion for a protective ritual involving salt and candles. With newfound determination, Ethan gathered the necessary supplies from his kitchen. He created a circle of salt around the remaining shards of the mirror, whispering a protective mantra he found online. As he lit a candle and placed it in the center, he felt a flicker of hope amidst the dread. But as the flame flickered to life, the temperature in the room dropped, and the shadows began to undulate violently, as if enraged by his actions. Ethan's heart raced, but he stood firm, reminding himself of his purpose. Just as he began to feel a sense of control, the shadows coalesced, forming a figure at the edge of the circle. The shape was vaguely humanoid, its features obscured by darkness. It whispered his name, a chilling sound that echoed through the room, sending waves of terror coursing through him. Ethan. The voice was a low, guttural murmur, almost familiar, yet dripping with malice. He could feel his resolve slipping as the shadows reached toward him, dark tendrils snaking closer with each heartbeat. "I know you," Ethan stammered, trying to reclaim his power. "You're not welcome here." The figure paused, as if considering his words. In that moment, Ethan felt a strange connection, a pull that made him question everything he thought he knew. Was this shadow a reflection of his own fears? A manifestation of something deeper within him? As the shadows flickered, Ethan braced himself for the truth. The tension in the room hung like a storm cloud, thick and oppressive. The shadowy figure loomed at the edge of Ethan's salt circle, its features still shrouded in darkness. His heart thundered in his chest as he struggled to maintain his composure. The whispers continued to echo, the low timbre calling to him with an unsettling familiarity that sent chills down his spine. "Ethan." The voice carried an eerie weight, reverberating within the confines of his mind. It felt like a beckoning, a siren's call luring him into the depths of despair. "Stop," he shouted, his voice stronger than he felt. "I won't let you in. You have no power over me." The candle flickered wildly, as though responding to his rising panic. Yet, deep down, Ethan questioned his own words. The shadow was not merely a specter. It embodied the fears he had buried within himself, his doubts, his insecurities, and the unrelenting anxiety that clung to him since childhood. The figure seemed to sense his turmoil. It stepped closer, the darkness swirling around it like a living entity. The air grew colder, and Ethan could feel a palpable energy radiating from it, a mixture of despair and longing that threatened to engulf him. "I know your fears, Ethan," it whispered, its voice smooth and taunting. "I know what you hide from the world. Let me show you." Ethan's mind raced. He had read about how shadows feed on fear, thriving on the vulnerabilities of their victims. But was this shadow merely a reflection of his own insecurities, or something more? The uncertainty gnawed at him, drawing him closer to the edge of fear. As if sensing his hesitation, the shadow extended a dark hand toward him. A surge of energy pulsed through the air, causing the salt barrier to shimmer ominously. The candle flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced against the walls, morphing into twisted shapes. "Embrace the darkness," it urged, its voice now a seductive whisper. "You cannot escape it. You must confront it." Ethan swallowed hard, fighting the urge to step back. He could feel the darkness pulling at him, tempting him to surrender to the weight of his own fears. Memories flooded his mind, moments of failure, heartache, and self-doubt. Each recollection clawed at his resolve, threatening to break him down. "Enough," he shouted again, his voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. "I won't let you win. I choose to fight." With renewed determination, he focused on the protective barrier he had created. The salt began to glow softly, radiating warmth that pushed against the encroaching darkness. The shadow faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing its formless visage. "What are you afraid of, Ethan?" it pressed, a hint of desperation lacing its words. "What lies beneath your surface? Face it." The question struck deep, forcing him to confront the very fears he had spent a lifetime avoiding. He could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on him, the relentless pressure to succeed, to be perfect, to never falter. The shadow was not merely an enemy. It was a mirror reflecting his innermost struggles. "I'm afraid of failing," Ethan admitted, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'm afraid of being alone, of never being enough." Each confession felt like a weight lifted, yet the shadow only thrived on his honesty, morphing and swirling as it fed on his vulnerability. "Then let me help you," it whispered, its tone shifting to something more coaxing, more persuasive. "Embrace the darkness. Only then can you find your true self." For a moment, Ethan wavered, tempted by the allure of absolution the shadow offered. But he remembered the lessons of his past, the way avoidance had only strengthened his fears. He recalled the countless nights spent pushing himself to the brink, the battles fought against his own mind. This shadow was not a savior. It was a thief, seeking to strip away the light he had fought so hard to maintain. "No," he declared, his voice gaining strength. "You are not my guide. I will not allow you to control me." In that instant, a surge of energy pulsed from him, radiating outward and pushing back against the figure. The salt circle glowed fiercely, forming a barrier that repelled the darkness. The shadow hissed, its form contorting as it struggled against the force. "You cannot keep me out forever," it seethed, its voice a low growl. "I am a part of you." Ethan felt a pang of fear shoot through him, but he stood his ground. "You may be a part of me, but you don't define me. I am stronger than my fears." With that declaration, the candle flickered one last time before flaring brightly, illuminating the room in a warm, golden light. The shadows recoiled, their shapes twisting and writhing, until the figure was reduced to a mere whisper, fading into the ether. Ethan fell to his knees, breathless and shaking. The oppressive weight that had hung over him began to lift, leaving him with a profound sense of clarity. He had faced the shadow, acknowledged his fears, and emerged on the other side. But as he looked around the dim room, he knew this was not the end. The battle was far from over. The shadow would return, and with it, the challenges he would have to face. He needed to prepare, to learn more about the nature of the entity that haunted him. Determined to find answers, Ethan stood, the remnants of the mirror still scattered on the floor. He would not allow fear to dictate his life any longer. Instead, he would uncover the truth, no matter how deep the shadows ran. Resolutely, he returned to his notebook and began to jot down his thoughts. He needed a plan, one that would lead him deeper into the mystery, unraveling the secrets that lay buried beneath the surface. The night wore on, but with each stroke of the pen, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just an artist. He was a seeker of truth, a warrior against the shadows that threatened to engulf him. Little did he know, the next encounter would bring him closer to the heart of the darkness, where answers awaited, and where the greatest challenge of all lay in wait. With dawn's first light creeping through the cracks in the curtains, Ethan felt a strange sense of clarity wash over him. He had faced the shadow and survived, but he also knew that this was merely the beginning. The encounter left him with more questions than answers, and a gnawing urgency propelled him forward. The mystery surrounding the shadow and the broken mirror beckoned him, promising revelations that could alter the very fabric of his existence. Eager to deepen his understanding, Ethan set his sights on the local library. If there were any records of shadowy encounters, legends, or supernatural phenomena in Elmsworth, he would find them there. He gathered his notebook, the eerie tales he had read about shadows still echoing in his mind, and ventured into the cool morning air. As he walked through the quiet streets, he couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. The world around him felt charged, as though the very air buzzed with anticipation. He dismissed the sensation as remnants of the previous night's encounter, but it lingered like an unwelcome guest. Upon entering the library, the smell of aged paper and leather bindings wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. The high shelves lined with countless tomes seemed to whisper secrets of their own. He made his way to the reference section, where rows of dusty encyclopedias and history books waited, their spines cracked from years of use. Ethan pulled several volumes on local history and folklore, scattering them across a nearby table. He pored over each one, searching for any mention of shadows or unexplained occurrences. Hours slipped by as he immersed himself in tales of old, tales of those who had confronted the darkness before him. After a while, a particular book caught his attention, The Haunting of Elmsworth, True Accounts of the Supernatural. Its cover was faded, but it held a certain allure. He flipped through the pages and found a chapter dedicated to the shadows that haunted the town. The author spoke of various encounters, each more chilling than the last. But one story resonated deeply with Ethan, a tale of a local artist who had succumbed to the shadows that dwelled in the corners of his mind, eventually vanishing without a trace. Ethan, the voice of the librarian, snapped him back to reality. He looked up to see an elderly woman with spectacles perched on her nose, peering at him with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You've been here quite a while. Are you finding what you're looking for?" "I think so," he replied, hesitating before adding, "I'm interested in stories about shadows and unusual phenomena." Her expression shifted slightly, a knowing look crossing her face. "Ah, the shadows have always been a part of Elmsworth's fabric. Many have experienced their grip in different ways. But be cautious. Sometimes curiosity leads to darker paths." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "There are stories," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "of those who sought answers but found only despair. The shadows can be deceptive. They often feed on your fears. If you're not careful, you might invite something you can't control." Her words struck a chord deep within him. "I faced a shadow last night. It whispered to me, tried to manipulate my fears." The librarian studied him carefully, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You confronted it directly, then?" "That takes courage, but understand this. Shadows are relentless. If they sense weakness, they will exploit it." "I know that now," Ethan said, determination igniting within him. "But I need to know more. I can't let this shadow dictate my life." She nodded, a hint of approval flickering in her gaze. "Very well. Seek out the truth, but tread carefully. Sometimes, the answers you find may not be what you expect." With that warning echoing in his mind, Ethan returned to his research, delving deeper into the stories of those who had encountered the shadows. He discovered accounts of individuals who had experienced strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, feelings of being watched, and shadows that seemed to breathe life into the darkness. Each tale fed into the growing complexity of his own experiences. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, a thought struck him. The broken mirror. If mirrors were indeed portals, as suggested by the tales he had read, perhaps there was a way to understand what had transpired during his last encounter. He hastily gathered his notes, determination coursing through him. "I need to return to my studio," he muttered to himself. Back in his apartment, the remnants of the shattered mirror lay strewn across the floor. As he cleared the area, Ethan felt a sense of purpose. He carefully gathered the larger pieces, placing them on a table. "Let's see what you're hiding," he murmured, staring into the fragments. Ethan set up a makeshift workstation, surrounding the mirror shards with candles and salt. He recalled the cleansing ritual he had read about earlier, and decided to perform it once more, hoping it would reveal something he had missed. As he lit the candles, their flickering flames cast long shadows against the walls. He arranged the mirror pieces in a pattern, forming a circle and placing the largest shard in the center. "Show me what I need to see," he whispered, focusing his energy on the fragments. The shadows danced around him, swirling and shifting as if responding to his command. Ethan felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing him closer to the mirror. He leaned over the shard, peering into its depths. For a brief moment, the world around him faded, and he found himself gazing into a swirling void. Images flashed before him, memories intertwined with dark tendrils, each one a reflection of his innermost fears. He saw himself as a child, timid and afraid, clutching a sketchbook in the corner of his room while shadows loomed in the corners. The vision shifted, revealing moments of failure and regret, missed opportunities, broken relationships, and nights spent wrestling with his own demons. Each memory felt like a weight pressing down on him, the shadows whispering doubts and fears he had long buried. Suddenly, A new image broke through the haze. A glimpse of the shadowy figure standing beside his bed, its form more defined now. It beckoned to him, a siren luring him deeper into the void. "Join me," it whispered, its voice seductive yet chilling. "You can be free." "No," Ethan shouted, breaking the spell. He recoiled from the mirror, heart racing, breath coming in ragged gasps. The shadows flickered, retreating momentarily as he regained his composure. But the vision had revealed something vital. The shadow was not merely an external force. It was a manifestation of his own fears. To conquer it, he needed to confront these hidden demons and reclaim the parts of himself he had lost. With renewed determination, Ethan set to work, pouring his heart into a new project, a series of paintings that would delve into the depths of his psyche. He would use art as a means of confrontation, channeling his fears onto the canvas and transforming them into something tangible. As he painted late into the night, the shadows in his apartment seemed to shift and swirl, but he no longer felt afraid. Instead, he embraced the darkness, allowing it to inspire him rather than consume him. Each stroke of the brush brought forth images of his battles, both internal and external, laying bare his struggles in vivid color. Yet, deep down, he knew the shadow was still lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness. He could feel its presence, a persistent reminder that the battle was far from over. With each passing day, Ethan committed himself to understanding the shadow's nature. He sought out others who had faced similar experiences, sharing stories of resilience and strength. Through these connections, he discovered a community of individuals who understood the grip of fear and the power of art as a healing force. But in the back of his mind, the warning of the librarian echoed. Sometimes, the answers you find may not be what you expect. He needed to stay vigilant, for the shadow was ever watchful, ready to exploit any crack in his resolve. And so, as Ethan painted his fears into existence, he prepared for the inevitable confrontation that lay ahead. The battle between light and darkness raged on, each stroke of the brush a testament to his refusal to back down. But as the night deepened, he couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan immersed himself in his art, using it as both a shield and a sword against the shadows that threatened to engulf him. Each stroke of paint was a step toward reclaiming his power, and his studio became a sanctuary filled with vibrant colors that contrasted sharply with the darkness lurking just outside the edges of his mind. Despite his efforts, however, the shadow remained a constant presence, its influence seeping into his dreams and blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. Ethan often woke up drenched in sweat, heart racing, feeling the familiar chill of something lurking just beyond the veil of his consciousness. He fought to shake off the feeling, telling himself it was merely a figment of his imagination, a trick played by his overactive mind. One evening, as he prepared for another night of painting, Ethan received an unexpected visit from Clara, his childhood friend. She had heard whispers about his recent endeavors and wanted to check in. Her vibrant energy and unwavering optimism provided a refreshing counterbalance to his brooding thoughts. "Ethan, you've changed," Clara exclaimed as she stepped into his studio, her eyes wide with admiration. "These paintings are incredible. It's like you've poured your soul into them." Ethan smiled, grateful for her encouragement, but also wary of sharing the darker aspects of his journey. "Thanks, Clara. I've been working through some things." "Things?" she echoed, arching an eyebrow. "You mean your art? Because it seems more like you're fighting a battle." Her intuition caught him off guard. He hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "It's complicated. I've been confronting some personal demons. And, well, there's a shadow." "Shadow?" Clara's curiosity deepened. "What do you mean?" "Not just a shadow. It's like this presence that..." Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Ethan felt a chill in the air, an almost electric tension that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. He glanced toward the windows, half expecting to see the familiar silhouette lurking outside. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, her brow furrowed in concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's just, I've had some strange experiences lately," Ethan admitted, trying to shake off the unease. Nothing to worry about, though. Clara's expression softened. You know you can talk to me, right? Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. Ethan appreciated her support, but part of him felt reluctant to drag her into the dark shadows of his mind. I'll figure it out, he assured her, attempting to dismiss her concern with a smile. Let's focus on the paintings for now. As they admired the artworks, Clara noticed a particular piece that had emerged from his latest frenzy of creativity. It depicted a shadowy figure, indistinct yet menacing, looming over a figure that bore a striking resemblance to Ethan himself. The stark contrast of colors drew her in, and she studied it intently. Wow, this one is haunting, she remarked, her voice barely above a whisper. What inspired it? Ethan hesitated. It's an embodiment of my fears. Clara tilted her head, considering his words. Fears can be powerful muses, but it looks like you're wrestling with something much darker. You can't let it consume you. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach at her perceptiveness. I know I'm trying, but it feels like the more I confront it, the stronger it becomes. As he spoke, the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift, as if responding to his words. He glanced toward the window, a flicker of movement catching his eye. A fleeting silhouette danced across the glass, sending a chill down his spine. Ethan? Clara's voice pulled him back to the moment. You seem distracted. What's wrong? Just a trick of the light, he said quickly, forcing a smile. You know how shadows can play tricks on you. Are you sure? Clara pressed, her concern palpable. I feel like there's something more going on here. I'm fine, he insisted a little too forcefully. Really, it's nothing I can't handle. But the doubt lingered in the air, heavy and palpable. Clara studied him for a moment, then took a step closer, her voice dropping to a softer tone. Ethan, I care about you. Whatever it is, don't hesitate to reach out. Shadows thrive in isolation. He nodded, appreciating her concern, but feeling an overwhelming urge to protect her from the darkness that threatened to envelop him. I promise I'll be okay. As the evening wore on, Clara helped him prepare for an upcoming art show where he would showcase his latest pieces. Despite her bright presence, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The more he painted, the more he felt it lurking just beyond the periphery of his awareness. Later that night, after Clara had left, Ethan returned to his studio, determined to paint one more piece before bed. The room was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of the candles he had lit earlier. The atmosphere felt heavy, the shadows creeping closer, almost as if they were alive. He positioned himself in front of the canvas and closed his eyes, allowing his mind to drift. Images of the shadow flooded back, the whispers echoing in his ears. Join me, be free. The words twisted in his mind, taunting him. He picked up his brush and began to paint furiously, capturing the essence of the shadow, the darkness that loomed over him, threatening to engulf his spirit. As he worked, the air grew colder, the candles flickering violently as if a gust of wind swept through the room. Ethan paused, looking around as the shadows deepened, swirling in a way that felt almost sentient. He could hear the faintest whispers, calling to him, urging him to give in to the darkness. No, he shouted, grounding himself. You won't take me. Suddenly, the studio plunged into darkness as the power went out, leaving him in eerie silence. Heart racing, Ethan felt the familiar weight of dread settle over him. He stumbled towards the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of what lay outside, but it was too dark to see anything. A soft tapping interrupted the silence, a rhythmic sound echoing from the direction of his bedroom. Ethan's breath hitched as he felt a familiar chill crawl up his spine. It was the same sound he had heard the night the shadow had first appeared. Summoning his courage, he crept toward the source of the tapping, each step heavy with the knowledge of what he might find. The shadows loomed large around him, thick and oppressive, as he reached for the door to his bedroom. With a trembling hand, he opened it, revealing a darkness that felt almost alive. The tapping continued, louder now, reverberating through the stillness. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped inside, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. And then he saw it. Standing beside his bed, shrouded in darkness, was the shadow, the very embodiment of his fears. It seemed more defined now, its form twisting and contorting in a way that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Ethan felt the cold grip of fear wrap around him, paralyzing him in place. "Ethan," it whispered, its voice low and sinister, "you cannot escape me." His mind raced, fighting against the paralysis. He had faced this before. He had to confront it again. "You're not real," he shouted, mustering every ounce of courage he had. The shadow laughed, a haunting sound that echoed through the room. "I am as real as the fears you bury. You cannot hide from me, nor can you paint me away." As it stepped closer, Ethan felt the air grow thicker, almost suffocating. He could see the contours of its face, dark and twisted, reflecting the deepest corners of his own insecurities. Memories of doubt and pain surged forward, threatening to consume him. In that moment of raw vulnerability, Ethan realized he had a choice. He could let the shadow engulf him, or he could stand his ground and fight back. He focused on the warmth of the colors he had painted, the brightness that represented hope and healing. "You don't control me," he declared, his voice steady. "I am not afraid of you." With that proclamation, a surge of energy coursed through him. The shadows began to recede slightly, the light from his paintings flickering to life, as if responding to his newfound resolve. "Do you think you can escape?" the shadow hissed, its form shifting dangerously. "I am not escaping," Ethan replied, taking a step forward. "I am confronting you." With that, he reached deep into himself, drawing on every ounce of strength he had cultivated through his art, his connections with Clara, and the community he had discovered. The candles flickered brightly, illuminating the room as if igniting a battle between light and darkness. The shadow recoiled, but Ethan pressed on, determined to banish the fear that had gripped him for so long. He raised his hands, envisioning the colors of his paintings swirling around him, forming a protective barrier against the encroaching darkness. The shadow wailed, the sound echoing with a mix of anger and fear. "You cannot defeat me. Watch me," Ethan said, channeling every ounce of determination into his words. With a final, defiant thrust, he unleashed a wave of vibrant energy, the colors bursting forth like a radiant explosion. The room flooded with light, drowning out the shadow and its sinister whispers. For the first time, Ethan felt the oppressive weight lift from his chest, and he watched in awe as the shadow dissipated into the light, a fading echo of the fear that had once ruled his life. Breathless, Ethan stood alone in the aftermath, surrounded by the remnants of his art, now vibrant and alive. The shadows no longer felt threatening. Instead, they were reminders of the battles he had fought and the resilience he had discovered within himself. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating his studio in a warm glow. Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but he knew the journey was far from over. Shadows would always exist, but he now understood that they were merely a part of the human experience, something to confront, not to fear. With renewed resolve, he picked up his brush, ready to create once more. The canvas awaited, and he was ready to fill it with light. The sun poured into Ethan's studio, illuminating the canvases that now radiated with color and life. Each brushstroke felt like a declaration of victory, a testament to the strength he had discovered within himself. However, as he painted, an unsettling realization began to creep into his consciousness. The shadow may have been vanquished for now, but the mystery surrounding its presence lingered, like a specter at the edge of his awareness. Determined to understand the origin of the shadow and why it had targeted him, Ethan made a plan. He would delve deeper into his past, exploring the memories and experiences that had shaped him, searching for clues that could shed light on the darkness he had faced. Perhaps there was something within his own history that had summoned it, something he had buried deep beneath layers of denial and fear. The first step on this journey of self-discovery began with Clara. She had always been intuitive, sensing emotions that often lay beneath the surface. If anyone could help him untangle the threads of his past, it was her. Ethan invited Clara over that evening, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the room, He set out snacks and prepared a pot of herbal tea, trying to create an atmosphere of warmth and safety. When Clara arrived, her eyes lit up at the sight of the vibrant canvases surrounding her. "Ethan, these are stunning," she exclaimed, stepping closer to examine the details. "It's like they're alive." "Thanks," he replied, a hint of pride swelling in his chest. "But they're not the only thing I want to talk about tonight." Clara's expression shifted to one of concern. "What's on your mind?" Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. "I need to understand more about the shadow. I think it's tied to my past in some way, and I'd like your help to explore it." She nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. "Of course. I'm here for you, Ethan. Let's uncover whatever it is that's haunting you." They settled onto the floor, surrounded by the vibrant canvases, and began to reminisce about their childhood. Clara recounted stories from school, while Ethan reflected on moments that had shaped him, particularly the loss of his father when he was a teenager. "Do you remember that summer when we built that treehouse?" Clara asked, laughter dancing in her voice. "We thought we were going to live there forever." Ethan chuckled at the memory, but it quickly faded, replaced by a shadow of sorrow. "Yeah, I do. I remember feeling so free up there. It was one of the last times I felt truly happy." The mention of that treehouse stirred something within Ethan. It was a time when life felt simple, filled with dreams and laughter. But it was also a time marked by loss. His father's passing had cast a long shadow over his family, and the grief had seeped into every corner of his life, suffocating the joy he once knew. "Do you think losing him affected you more than you realized?" Clara asked gently, her voice soft as she touched his arm reassuringly. "Maybe," he replied, staring at his hands, where the paint from his recent work still lingered. "I tried to bury it, to move on, but I think the pain never really left. Maybe that's what the shadow represents, the unresolved grief and fear of losing more people I care about." Clara's brow furrowed in thought. "It makes sense. Shadows often reflect our deepest fears. If you've been suppressing your feelings about your father, that could have given the shadow power over you." Her words struck a chord within Ethan. The realization that he had been holding on to pain and fear all this time was both liberating and terrifying. "I thought I could control it," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But it only grew stronger." "That's the thing about shadows," Clara said softly. "They thrive in the dark. The more we hide our feelings, the more power they have over us. It's like they're waiting for the right moment to strike." As the conversation deepened, Ethan shared more about the shadow's haunting whispers, the sense of dread that had enveloped him, and the haunting memories he had tried to escape. Clara listened intently, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the storm of his emotions. "Have you thought about confronting those memories directly?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "Sometimes, facing what we fear most can be the key to breaking its hold." Ethan nodded, the idea resonating within him. "I think I need to return to that treehouse. I haven't been back since everything changed. Maybe it's time to confront the memories there." Clara's expression brightened. "That sounds like a great plan. It could be therapeutic to reconnect with that part of your past. I can come with you if you'd like." The thought of Clara by his side brought him a sense of comfort and strength. "I'd appreciate that. It feels like I can't do this alone." The following morning, they set out toward the treehouse, located deep within the woods behind Ethan's childhood home. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. As they walked, Ethan could feel a mix of anticipation and dread building within him. When they finally arrived, the treehouse stood in a clearing, cloaked in a veil of overgrown vines and moss. It looked different yet familiar, a remnant of his childhood dreams, now weathered by time. Ethan stepped closer, memories flooding back, of laughter, adventure, and the warmth of his father's presence. The sunlight filtered through the branches, casting playful shadows on the ground, but they felt different now, less ominous and more nostalgic. "Are you ready?" Clara asked, standing beside him. Ethan took a deep breath, heart pounding in his chest. "Yeah, I think so." They climbed the wooden ladder, each step sending shivers of anticipation through Ethan. As he reached the top, he stepped inside, the familiar scent of agewood enveloping him. It felt like stepping back in time. Inside the treehouse, the walls were covered in the remnants of his childhood. drawings he had made, words scribbled in haste, and even the remnants of a makeshift fort he and Clara had created. It was a time capsule of innocence and joy, now tinged with bittersweet nostalgia. "Wow, it's just as I remember," Ethan murmured, brushing his fingers over the faded drawings. "It feels like a piece of my soul is still here." "Take your time," Clara said softly, sitting on the floor, her eyes surveying the space. "Let it wash over you." Ethan sat down, absorbing the memories. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to drift into the past. Images of his father reading stories to him floated through his mind. Laughter, warmth, and a sense of safety that felt so distant now. But then, the memories turned dark. He recalled the day everything changed, the moment he learned of his father's death. The weight of grief settled heavily on his chest, threatening to suffocate him. "Ethan," Clara's voice broke through the haze, pulling him back to the present. "It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to grieve." Tears welled in his eyes as the dam broke, and he felt the flood of emotions crashing over him. "I never let myself grieve," he admitted, voice cracking. "I thought I had to be strong for everyone else." Clara moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. "You're not alone. It's okay to feel vulnerable. This place holds so much of your heart, and it's important to honor that." As Ethan sat in the warmth of Clara's embrace, the shadows of the past began to shift. He felt the weight of grief start to lift, replaced by a sense of catharsis. The memories no longer felt like a prison, but a part of the tapestry that made him who he was. "I need to let go," he whispered, wiping away tears. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means making space for healing. With Clara by his side, he opened his heart to the memories, both joyful and painful. He spoke of his father, the lessons he had learned, and the love that still lingered. As he shared, the shadows that once loomed over him began to dissolve, transformed into something more manageable, more human. The hours passed like minutes, and the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. Ethan felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Hope for healing, hope for growth. As they descended from the treehouse, Ethan glanced back, a sense of closure settling within him. "Thank you, Clara. I couldn't have done this without you." "Always, Ethan," she replied, her smile radiant. "We're in this together." The shadows of the past may have shaped him, but they no longer defined him. With newfound clarity, Ethan was ready to face whatever came next, both the light and the dark. The following days were filled with a sense of rebirth for Ethan. After facing his past in the treehouse, he felt more grounded, more aware of the shadows that lingered within him. Yet, as the nights fell, the whispering shadows began to stir again, reminding him that his journey wasn't complete. The darkness that had haunted him was not just a remnant of his grief. It was an entity that thrived on fear and uncertainty. Ethan found himself struggling against the encroaching darkness, but now he had Clara by his side, offering unwavering support. Together, they began a new routine. Each night, they would sit together in his studio, sketching and painting, surrounded by vibrant colors and the warm glow of lamps. Clara brought a sense of normalcy to his once haunted space. But one night, as they worked, Ethan sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The air grew colder, and a familiar heaviness settled in the room. Clara's eyes darted around nervously, her once cheerful demeanor replaced by a palpable tension. "Ethan, do you feel that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, heart racing as he stood, his instincts on high alert. The shadows began to twist and swirl, growing denser, more alive. A chill ran down Ethan's spine as he recalled the sinister whispers that had plagued him before. This time, however, he felt different, stronger, more prepared to confront whatever was coming. "Stay close to me," he instructed Clara, gripping her hand tightly. "We've faced this before, and we can do it again." As they stood together, the shadow materialized in the corner of the room, more formidable than ever. Its shape was amorphous, shifting and undulating, as if it were feeding off their fear. The whispering grew louder, filling the air with echoes of doubt and despair. "Ethan," it hissed, the voice a chilling mimicry of his own thoughts. You think you've defeated me? You're just a fragile shell, pretending to be strong. You can't escape your past. Clara squeezed his hand tighter, her eyes wide with fear. Don't listen to it, Ethan. Remember what you discovered in the treehouse. You're stronger than this. Taking a deep breath, Ethan focused on the vibrant colors surrounding him. He recalled the feelings of warmth and love he had shared with Clara and the memories of his father that had once felt so heavy. He remembered the light he had found in the darkness and the strength that came from vulnerability. You're wrong, Ethan shouted, his voice reverberating through the room. I'm not just my fears. I am more than the shadows you represent. I have faced my past, and I refuse to let you control me any longer. The shadow hesitated, its form flickering as if caught off guard. The whispers wavered, replaced by a low growl. You think you can banish me? I am a part of you, Ethan. You can never be free of me. Clara stepped forward, her voice unwavering. No, you don't define him. He's faced his grief, and he's embraced his light. You're just a fragment of his past, a part he's learned to accept, not a monster to be feared. Ethan felt a surge of power at Clara's words. He turned to her, and in that moment, he knew they were stronger together. The shadows began to quiver, losing their hold over him. Together, he shouted, raising his hands toward the darkness. We're not afraid of you. We're here to reclaim our lives. In that instant, the room filled with radiant light, cascading from Ethan's heart and flowing through his body like a river of color. The energy surged, illuminating the corners of the room and enveloping Clara in a warm embrace. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in protest as the light grew brighter, engulfing everything in its path. Ethan felt a release, a catharsis, as he poured every ounce of love and determination into the light. Memories of laughter, love, and warmth flooded his mind, fueling the brightness that was now pushing back the shadow. No more hiding, no more fear, he cried, the power of his words echoing through the studio. The shadow writhed, its form disintegrating in the face of Ethan's unwavering resolve. The air crackled with energy as the room transformed. The oppressive weight that had once hung in the atmosphere evaporated, leaving behind a space filled with light and life. The shadow began to dissolve, the whispers fading into silence, replaced by a harmonious melody of color and hope. With one final surge, Ethan unleashed the light, and the shadow exploded in a burst of dark mist, evaporating into nothingness. The studio, once a place of fear, now felt like a sanctuary, a space reborn from the ashes of his struggles. Breathless and trembling, Ethan collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. But this time they were tears of joy. Clara knelt beside him, her expression a mix of relief and pride. You did it, Ethan. You faced it head on, and you won. I couldn't have done it without you, he replied, wiping his tears. You helped me see the truth, that I can't let my past dictate my present. As they sat together in the aftermath, the vibrant colors of the studio pulsed with newfound life. Ethan felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of the shadows that had once haunted him. He had faced the darkest parts of himself and emerged victorious, ready to embrace the light that lay ahead. But as they gazed around the room, a sense of calm settled in. Ethan knew this wasn't the end. It was merely a new beginning. Shadows would always exist, but he was now equipped to face them with courage and resilience. We'll always have our battles, he said softly, glancing at Clara. But now, I feel ready to face whatever comes next. Me too, Clara replied, her eyes shining with warmth. And I'll be right here with you. In that moment, surrounded by the vivid colors of his creations and the comforting presence of his friend, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. The past had shaped him, but it no longer held power over his future. With every brushstroke, every heartbeat, he would create a new narrative, a story defined not by shadows, but by the light he had found within. In the days that followed the climactic confrontation with the shadow, Ethan found himself in a state of serene contemplation. The battle had marked a significant turning point in his life, yet it was merely the beginning of a new journey, a journey of understanding, healing, and connection. Each morning, He awoke with the sunlight streaming through his window, illuminating the vibrant colors of his studio, a stark contrast to the darkness that had once enveloped him. Ethan and Clara spent countless hours painting together, their laughter echoing through the studio as they created colorful masterpieces. Each stroke of the brush felt liberating, a testament to their shared strength. But even amidst this newfound joy, Ethan felt an undeniable pull, a lingering question that gnawed at the corners of his mind. "Clara, what do you think happens to the shadows once they're gone?" he asked one afternoon, his brow furrowed in thought as they cleaned their brushes. Clara paused, contemplating his question. "I think shadows don't really disappear. They transform. They become a part of us, reminders of what we've faced and overcome." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "You're right, but sometimes I wonder if they leave behind remnants, pieces of themselves that linger, waiting to be understood." With that thought weighing on his mind, Ethan resolved to explore the depths of his past further. He wanted to uncover the remnants of the shadow that had tormented him for so long. Armed with the knowledge that he had faced the darkness, he set out to confront the memories that still haunted him. One rainy afternoon, while rummaging through his old boxes in the attic, Ethan stumbled upon a dusty photo album. The cover was worn, the edges frayed, but he could see the golden lettering spelling out family memories. His heart raced as he pulled it from the box, memories flooding back. The warmth of family gatherings, the laughter of his father, and the joy that had filled their home before the tragedy struck. Sitting cross-legged on the attic floor, he opened the album, flipping through the pages filled with snapshots of moments frozen in time. As he turned each page, he felt a mixture of nostalgia and sadness, the memories bittersweet. But among the photos, one image caught his eye, a picture of his father standing in front of the treehouse, a broad smile on his face. Ethan felt a pang in his chest. He remembered the summer days spent building that treehouse, filled with dreams and laughter. But as he gazed at the picture, he also recalled the day it all changed. The day he lost his father to an accident that had shattered their family. The shadow had begun that day, a heavy weight that had never truly lifted. "Dad," Ethan whispered, tears stinging his eyes. He longed for his father's presence, for guidance and comfort. "I wish I could talk to you." As he closed the album, a sense of determination washed over him. He knew that to fully heal, he needed to confront his past. He decided to return to the treehouse, his sanctuary, his place of transformation. That evening, Ethan and Clara made their way to the treehouse, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. The air was crisp, and the leaves rustled softly in the breeze, as if welcoming them back. As they climbed the familiar ladder, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Inside, the treehouse still held the remnants of their childhood. A small desk, scattered sketches, and the faint scent of cedar. But now it felt different. It was no longer a place of sorrow, but a sanctuary of memories, a bridge to his past. "Let's paint here," Clara suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "It'll be like reclaiming this space." Ethan agreed, and together they spread out their supplies, their laughter ringing through the branches. As they painted, Ethan felt the weight of his memories slowly lifting, each brushstroke releasing a piece of the sorrow he had carried for too long. In the midst of their creative frenzy, Clara suddenly stopped, her gaze drifting toward the window. "Ethan, look!" she exclaimed, pointing to the horizon. Through the trees, the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape. It was breathtaking, a moment of pure magic. Ethan felt a warmth enveloping him, a connection to something greater. "Do you feel that?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. "It's like the light is reaching out to us." As they continued to paint, Ethan found himself opening up to Clara about his father, sharing stories that had been locked away in his heart. The more he spoke, the lighter he felt, as if the weight of his grief was being transformed into something beautiful. "Your dad sounds amazing," Clara said, her voice filled with compassion. "It's okay to miss him, Ethan. It's part of the healing process." Ethan smiled through his tears. "I've held on to so much pain, Clara, but being here, surrounded by these memories, I realize that I can honor him by celebrating the joy he brought into my life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that danced on the walls of the treehouse, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. He understood now that shadows were not to be feared but acknowledged, a part of his journey that would always be with him. Later that night, as they returned home, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that he could carry his father's legacy with him, transforming the pain into strength and creativity. The shadows may have lingered, but he had learned to embrace the light. That evening, as he lay in bed, Ethan gazed out the window, watching the stars twinkle against the dark sky. He felt a sense of connection to the universe, to his father, and to Clara. The memories that had once weighed him down were now threads woven into the fabric of his life. Reminders of love, resilience, and the beauty that could emerge from the darkness. As sleep began to envelop him, Ethan whispered into the night, "Thank you, Dad. I'll carry you with me always." With those words, he drifted into a peaceful slumber, the shadows of his past transforming into the guiding light of his future. The morning sun streamed through Ethan's window, illuminating the room with a golden glow. He awoke with a renewed sense of clarity and purpose, the heaviness of the past finally lifting. The shadows that once haunted him had transformed into a gentle reminder of resilience and growth. As he lay there, he could almost feel his father's presence, a warm embrace woven into the fabric of his spirit. Today felt different, a culmination of everything he had learned and experienced over the past weeks. It was time to share his journey, to honor his father's memory, and to inspire others to confront their shadows. Ethan made a mental note to invite Clara to join him for this new chapter, recognizing that their bond had been instrumental in his healing. After a quick breakfast, Ethan headed to his studio, the vibrant colors of his paintings reflecting the energy within him. He pulled out a canvas, determined to create something that encapsulated his journey, a piece that embodied both the darkness he had faced and the light he had discovered. With every brushstroke, memories flooded back. The laughter shared in the treehouse, the moments of vulnerability with Clara, and the whispers of the shadow that had once loomed over him. He painted with fervor, layering colors and textures, pouring his emotions onto the canvas. Each hue represented a piece of his journey: grief, fear, love, and ultimately, acceptance. Hours passed as he lost himself in the creative process, the outside world fading away. Finally, as the sun began to set, he stepped back to admire his work. The canvas was a vibrant tapestry of emotions, a visual representation of his transformation. In the center, a brilliant light radiated outward, surrounded by darker shades that swirled and intertwined, illustrating the coexistence of light and shadow. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Clara's voice broke through his concentration, filled with excitement. She entered the studio, her eyes wide with curiosity as she took in the painting. "This is incredible. Thank you," he replied, a smile spreading across his face. "I wanted to capture everything we've been through, the shadows, the light, and the journey of finding peace." Clara stepped closer, examining the details. "It's beautiful. You've really poured your heart into it. This piece tells your story." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. "I want to share it, Clara. I want to hold an exhibition, to invite people to come and see not just my work, but to hear our story, how shadows can be transformed into light." Clara's expression softened, her eyes shimmering with understanding. "That's a wonderful idea, Ethan. It'll be a powerful way to connect with others who may be struggling. We can showcase your art and create a space for open conversations about healing and embracing our pasts." The two spent the next few days planning the exhibition, pouring their energy into creating a space that was inviting and thought-provoking. They hung Ethan's paintings on the walls, each one telling a different aspect of his journey. Clara helped organize a cozy corner for guests to share their own stories and reflections, encouraging dialogue and connection. On the day of the exhibition, Ethan's heart raced with anticipation and anxiety. The room was filled with the scent of fresh paint and the warmth of soft lighting, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and welcoming. Guests began to trickle in, mingling and admiring the artwork. As people began to share their stories, Ethan felt a wave of emotions wash over him. Each narrative echoed the themes of his own journey: loss, healing, and the power of connection. He watched as people engaged in heartfelt conversations, their vulnerabilities laid bare, and the air buzzed with understanding and empathy. In a quiet moment, Clara stood beside Ethan, her presence grounding him. "Look at them," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Your art is touching lives." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "This is what I wanted, to create a space for healing and connection." It's incredible to see people embracing their stories. As the evening unfolded, one woman approached Ethan, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you for sharing your journey," she said softly. "I lost my brother last year, and I've struggled to cope. Your story inspires me to face my grief instead of hiding from it." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat, touched by her words. "I'm so sorry for your loss. It's okay to grieve, but remember that you can also find joy in the memories you shared." It's a journey we all take in our own time. As more guests shared their stories, Ethan realized that the shadows he had once feared were now powerful connections, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences. The exhibition had become a celebration of life, a reminder that even in darkness, there is hope and light. As the evening came to a close, Ethan stood in the center of the room, surrounded by new friends and shared stories. He felt a profound sense of peace, the weight of his past transformed into strength and purpose. He had faced the shadows and emerged not only with a clearer understanding of himself, but with a community of support and love. That night, as he lay in bed, Ethan reflected on how far he had come. The journey of healing was ongoing, but he was no longer alone. The memories of his father, the laughter shared with Clara, and the connections forged through vulnerability were all part of his story now. A beautiful narrative filled with hope and resilience. And as he drifted into a peaceful sleep, he whispered into the night, "Thank you, Dad. I'll carry your light with me, always." With those words, he embraced the dreams that awaited him, ready to continue the journey of self-discovery and healing, hand in hand with those who had walked beside him. If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Let's begin the next story. The sound of the alarm clock cut through the peaceful silence of the early morning, forcing Amelia to peel her eyes open. The world outside her window was bathed in the soft hues of dawn, the golden lights spilling into her bedroom, illuminating the colorful posters of her favorite bands plastered on the walls. Yet, as she stretched her arms and yawned, a strange unease settled over her, a feeling that something was off. Amelia had just moved into this old house at the edge of town, excited to escape the chaos of her previous life. It was a quaint, two-story structure with creaky floors and charming quirks, filled with the remnants of those who came before her. But despite its inviting appearance, there was an undercurrent of mystery that wrapped around the house like an invisible fog. Rising from her bed, she glanced around the room, her gaze landing on the wooden bed frame that loomed in the corner. It was a beautiful piece of furniture, but something about it sent shivers down her spine. Perhaps it was the way the shadows danced beneath it, as if the darkness held secrets that were not meant to be uncovered. As she prepared for the day, the nagging sensation continued to linger, pulling her back toward the bed. Curiosity overcame her, and she knelt down, peering into the shadows. The dust bunnies scattered beneath the bed seemed innocent enough, but then her heart raced as she spotted something unusual, a faint, jagged line etched into the wood. "Just my imagination," she muttered to herself, brushing off the odd feeling. But as she stood up, her gaze lingered on that mark, its shape almost deliberate. She pushed it aside, shaking her head to clear the unsettling thoughts that began to creep in. The day passed in a blur of classes and interactions, but Amelia found her mind wandering back to that mark under the bed. After dinner, she returned home, the house enveloped in an eerie stillness that seemed to echo her unease. As she settled down in her room, she could no longer resist the pull of the unknown. Kneeling once again, she carefully moved aside the dust, her heart pounding in anticipation. The light from her lamp cast a warm glow, illuminating the area beneath the bed. As she brushed away the cobwebs, the scratched message came into clearer view, sending chills down her spine. There it was, unmistakable and haunting, The words, "I see you," scratched into the wood. The letters were jagged and deep, as if someone had carved them with a sense of urgency and desperation. A cold shiver raced through her body, and she instinctively glanced over her shoulder, half expecting someone to be lurking behind her. "What the hell?" she whispered to herself, her mind racing. Who had scratched this message? Was it a prank from the previous tenants, or something more sinister? Panic began to swirl within her, and she fought to remain calm. She had come to this house, seeking a fresh start, away from the shadows of her past, and now it felt as though the darkness had followed her. Determined to confront the fear bubbling inside her, Amelia pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of the disturbing message. She thought about what to do next. Perhaps sharing it with her friends would help alleviate the anxiety swirling in her mind. With shaking hands, she texted her best friend, "Jenna, you won't believe what I found under my bed. I need to show you." The reply came almost instantly, as it always did with Jenna. "What? Are you okay?" Amelia hesitated for a moment, then typed back, "Just come over. I'll explain when you get here." As she waited for Jenna's arrival, the house seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. Shadows crept into the corners of the room, and the air felt thick, stifling her breath. She stood up, pacing the room, trying to distract herself from the unsettling thoughts. When Jenna finally knocked on the door, Amelia hurried to let her in, relief washing over her. Jenna entered, her blonde curls bouncing as she surveyed the room. "What's going on?" "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "Come here," Amelia said, leading her to the bed. She pointed to the message, anxiety bubbling within her. "Look at this." Jenna knelt down, her eyes widening as she examined the scratched words. "Whoa, that's creepy. Are you sure it wasn't just the last tenants messing with you?" "I thought so, but it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels wrong. I can't shake this feeling that there's something more to it." Jenna shivered, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "What if someone's actually watching you? Like, from under the bed?" She joked, but the humor fell flat as the tension in the room thickened. "Stop it," Amelia snapped, but there was a hint of nervous laughter in her voice. "I need to know what this means. I don't want to let it consume me." "Okay, let's do some digging. Maybe we can find out more about this house and the previous owners," Jenna suggested, her voice steadier now. Together, they set out to research the history of the house. They scoured online databases, local news articles, and even reached out to neighbors. As they pieced together the story, Amelia felt a sense of foreboding wash over her. The house had a dark history. Years ago, it had belonged to a family that mysteriously vanished one night. Their disappearance had sent shockwaves through the community, but the case was never solved. The more they uncovered, the more unsettled Amelia became. "I can't believe this," Jenna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like something out of a horror movie." Amelia sat back, her mind racing with the implications. What if they never left? What if they're still here, watching, waiting? As the night deepened, an uneasy silence enveloped the house once more. Shadows danced on the walls, and Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The air was thick with tension as Amelia and Jenna sat in the living room, the glow from the laptop screen illuminating their anxious faces. The words, "I see you," echoed in Amelia's mind, taunting her with every breath. She felt trapped in a web of unease, where the lines between reality and imagination blurred, and the shadows seemed to whisper secrets she was not meant to hear. "Okay, so we know the family that lived here vanished without a trace," Jenna said, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear beneath it. "But that doesn't explain why someone would leave a message under your bed. Maybe it's just a coincidence." "Coincidence? It's not like someone else could have scratched that message there without knowing about the family. It feels too connected," Amelia replied, her fingers tapping nervously against her thigh. "I get it, but we need to keep a level head," Jenna urged, leaning closer. "Let's focus on the facts. Did you find out anything else about the house?" Amelia scrolled through the articles they had found. There was a rumor about strange noises at night. Footsteps, whispers. A few neighbors mentioned seeing shadows moving in the windows, but no one ever investigated properly. "Okay, that's definitely creepy. But maybe it's just the house settling or the wind," Jenna suggested, trying to inject some rationality into the conversation. Right, except this house is over 100 years old, and it creaks and groans like any other. This feels different, Amelia said, frustration creeping into her voice. The two friends fell into a contemplative silence, the soft sound of the laptop humming in the background. Amelia's gaze wandered toward the hallway leading to her bedroom, where shadows seemed to flicker and dance as the light dimmed outside. Do you think we should go check out the basement? Jenna asked suddenly, breaking the silence. I mean, if there's something weird going on, maybe we'll find a clue down there. Amelia's heart raced at the thought. The basement was another part of the house, shrouded in mystery. She had only ventured down there once since moving in, and even then, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. I don't know, Jenna. What if something's down there? Amelia replied, her voice trembling at the thought. Isn't that the point? We need to confront this head on. Besides, I'll be with you. We can bring flashlights, and I promise to stay close, Jenna reassured her, determination sparkling in her eyes. With a reluctant nod, Amelia agreed, the curiosity slowly overpowering her fear. The two friends gathered their flashlights, each beam of light cutting through the heavy darkness that loomed outside. As they approached the basement door, a chill ran down Amelia's spine. The wood felt cold beneath her fingers as she turned the doorknob, revealing a staircase that spiraled down into the unknown. Here goes nothing, Jenna said with a forced smile, and they began their descent. The basement was damp and musty, filled with shadows that seemed to stretch and curl around the edges of their flashlights. Amelia's heart raced as she scanned the area, taking in the cobwebs that clung to the rafters and the stacks of old boxes that lined the walls. Ugh, this place is a total nightmare, Jenna muttered, her flashlight flickering across the clutter. What even is all this? Just old junk, I guess, Amelia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But we need to keep looking. They moved deeper into the basement, their footsteps echoing off the concrete floor. Each creak of the wood and rustle of the old boxes sent shivers down Amelia's spine. As they rummaged through the boxes, Jenna suddenly called out, "Hey, I found something." Amelia rushed over, her curiosity piqued. Jenna held up a dusty old journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. "Look at this," she said, carefully opening it. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with looping handwriting that seemed to tell a story of its own. They leaned in closer, their eyes scanning the words as Jenna read aloud. The whispers grow louder every night. I feel them watching, waiting. I must find a way to escape this place. But the shadows, they know. Amelia's heart raced as Jenna flipped through the pages, each entry revealing the descent of the author into madness, an obsession with shadows, with the very essence of fear itself. Who wrote this? Amelia asked, her voice shaky. It doesn't say. Jenna's face paled as she continued reading. I see them in the corners of my vision, always lurking. They tell me I'm not alone, that they're watching. I hear them calling to me. This is getting creepy, Amelia said, glancing around as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. What if this is connected to that message under my bed? Maybe it is, Jenna agreed, her expression growing serious. What if the person who wrote this was trying to warn the next tenant about something? Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. What if that something is still here? Before they could ponder further, the overhead light flickered, casting erratic shadows across the basement walls. Both girls froze, their flashlights illuminating nothing but darkness. Did you see that? Jenna whispered, her voice trembling. Yeah, I did, Amelia replied, her heart racing. We should get out of here. As they turned to leave, Amelia's foot caught on an unseen object, sending her sprawling to the floor. The journal slipped from Jenna's hands and landed with a thud, pages fluttering open. In the dim light, Amelia's eyes widened as she noticed a shadow creeping across the floor toward them, a dark, elongated shape that seemed to pulse and writhe. Amelia, get up, Jenna shouted, panic rising in her voice. Amelia scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding as they bolted toward the stairs. But just as they reached the first step, a cold breeze swept through the basement, chilling them to the bone. The shadows around them flickered and twisted, whispering secrets that felt almost tangible. They sprinted up the stairs, their breaths coming in short gasps as they pushed through the basement door, slamming it shut behind them. "Oh my God!" Jenna exclaimed, her hands shaking. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," Amelia replied, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. "But whatever it is, I don't want to find out." The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had grown tighter, suffocating them in a sense of impending doom. They collapsed onto the living room floor, trying to catch their breath, the journal lying open nearby. "What do we do now?" Jenna asked, her voice small. Amelia glanced at the journal, her mind racing. "We need to find out more about that family and what happened to them. There has to be something we're missing." As the weight of their discovery sank in, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were not just figments of her imagination. They were a part of this house's history, intertwined with her own fate. She could almost hear their whispers echoing in her mind, and the message scratched under her bed felt like a warning she could no longer ignore. The hours passed in a haze of dread and curiosity, and the tension in the house became palpable. Amelia and Jenna sat cross-legged on the living room floor, the open journal sprawled between them like a portal to a different time. The dim glow of the lamp cast long shadows across the walls, each flicker igniting their fears. "What if we're not safe here?" Jenna murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "I mean, what if whatever was down there follows us?" "Then we have to be smarter than it," Amelia replied, forcing a confident tone. "We need to understand what happened to that family. There must be something in the journal that can help us." Jenna nodded, her brow furrowed as she flipped through the brittle pages once more. "This could take a while. It looks like they wrote a lot." As they pored over the journal, Amelia found herself captivated by the author's spiral into paranoia. Each entry painted a haunting picture of a family unraveling under the weight of unseen forces. It was as if the house itself had seeped into their minds, distorting reality until the line between the two became almost indistinguishable. "Look at this," Jenna said, her finger tracing the lines of one particularly frantic entry. "The shadows whisper my name. They tell me things I don't want to hear. They want me to join them." A chill raced down Amelia's spine. It's like they were trying to warn someone about what they experienced. "We need to find out more about the family. Who were they? What happened to them?" Jenna's eyes sparkled with determination, the fear giving way to a sense of purpose. Amelia nodded. "Let's start with the internet. There has to be more information available. If they went missing, there might be news articles or something." They grabbed the laptop, Jenna typing furiously as Amelia leaned in closer, scanning for any articles related to the previous occupants. As the search results populated the screen, a grim picture began to emerge. A family of 4 who had lived in the house for nearly a decade, their lives punctuated by strange occurrences and unsettling events that culminated in their sudden disappearance. "Look at this," Jenna said, pointing to an article dated several years prior. It mentions a string of strange sightings and noises. Neighbors reported seeing a dark figure lurking around the property at odd hours. And then one day, they just vanished. "Vanished," Amelia echoed, the weight of the word hanging heavily in the air. "It's almost as if they simply ceased to exist." Jenna continued scrolling, her eyes widening at another headline. "There's an unsolved case here. The police were involved, but they found no leads." It was like the family just evaporated. Amelia felt a sense of dread wash over her. What if they encountered something in this house? Something that made them disappear? Jenna frowned, biting her lip. "We can't jump to conclusions. Let's find out more about them first. Maybe there's a reason for their disappearance, something logical." The two of them delved deeper into the web of information, uncovering snippets of the family's life. They learned about the parents, Mark and Lisa, and their 2 children, Evan and Mia. Each article painted a picture of an ordinary family beset by extraordinary circumstances. As they pieced together the fragments of their lives, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that they were drawing closer to the heart of a dark mystery. "Listen to this," Jenna said, her voice barely above a whisper. A neighbor claimed to have seen Mark talking to a strange man late at night, someone who seemed to have an unnatural aura about him. After that, things began to escalate. The noises, the shadows, the fear. "What do you think he was talking to him about?" Amelia asked, her curiosity piqued. "Do you think it had something to do with the family's disappearance?" Jenna shrugged, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's possible, but without more evidence, we can't be sure. We should try to find people who live nearby. They might know more about what happened. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the house seemed to come alive with shadows that danced against the walls, every creak and sigh echoing with uncertainty. Amelia and Jenna made a plan to visit the neighborhood the following day, determined to uncover the truth behind the family's disappearance and the message that haunted Amelia's dreams. But as night fell, an unsettling feeling settled over Amelia. It was as if the house itself was aware of their intentions, a silent observer to their investigation. She glanced toward the hallway leading to her bedroom, the shadows appearing thicker, more pronounced, as if they were trying to tell her something. "Do you think we should check under the bed again?" Jenna asked suddenly, her voice taut with unease. "What if there's more to that message?" I don't know." Amelia hesitated, a wave of trepidation washing over her. "What if we find something worse? We have to be brave, right? We can't let fear control us," Jenna insisted, her eyes shining with determination. With a resigned nod, Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself for the unsettling task ahead. They ventured down the hallway, the air growing heavier with each step. As they entered the bedroom, the darkness seemed to pulse around them, whispering secrets Amelia was too afraid to understand. Jenna knelt beside the bed, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed it away from the wall, revealing the dust-covered floor beneath. "Here goes nothing," she murmured, peering underneath. Amelia leaned in closer, her heart racing. The shadows danced wildly in the corners of the room, and for a moment, she thought she saw a figure lurking just beyond the reach of their flashlights. "Do you see anything?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Not yet," Jenna replied, squinting into the darkness. Just as Amelia began to relax, Jenna gasped, "Oh my God, there's something here." Amelia's breath caught in her throat as Jenna pulled out a small object from the darkness. It was a crumpled piece of paper, its edges frayed and stained with age. "What is it?" Amelia asked, her pulse quickening. Jenna carefully unfolded it, her expression shifting from curiosity to horror. "It's another message, but this one is different." "What does it say?" Amelia urged, peering closer. "They are coming for you. You cannot escape the shadows. They know your name." A cold chill enveloped the room, and the air thickened with dread. Amelia's heart raced as the shadows seemed to close in around them, the weight of the words pressing heavily upon her. "Amelia, we need to leave," Jenna whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Now." But as they turned to escape, the shadows flickered, warping and twisting around them. The house groaned as if it were alive, and Amelia felt an overwhelming sense of dread clawing at her throat. "Run!" Amelia shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. They bolted from the room, racing down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing like thunder in the oppressive silence. As they reached the front door, the shadows surged behind them, dark tendrils reaching out as if trying to pull them back into the depths of the house. With a final burst of strength, Amelia yanked the door open, and they stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The darkness loomed behind them, but for the moment, they were free. As they stood outside, hearts pounding and bodies trembling, Amelia glanced back at the house, the windows seeming to glimmer with an unnatural light. "What the hell is happening?" Jenna breathed, her voice shaky. "I don't know," Amelia replied, feeling the weight of the journal in her hands. "But whatever it is, we need to figure it out before it's too late." They stood together under the stars, the chill of the night air a stark contrast to the heat of their racing hearts. The shadows of the house loomed large, but Amelia felt a surge of determination coursing through her veins. They would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As the moon hung high in the night sky, casting a pale glow over the neighborhood, Amelia and Jenna stood outside the front door of the haunted house, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The oppressive weight of the shadows that had lingered in the corners of the house now felt like a distant memory, but the terror of what lay within still clung to them. "Did you see that?" Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves in the night. It was like the shadows were alive. Amelia nodded, trying to shake off the chill that had settled over her. We need to talk to someone. We can't face this alone. There must be people who know about the house and what happened to the family. Jenna agreed, her eyes darting nervously toward the windows of the house, which appeared to be watching them. Let's go to the neighbor's house. They might know something. They walked briskly down the street, the cool air biting at their skin. The weight of the journal felt heavier in Amelia's bag with each step, a reminder of the dark secrets it held. When they reached the neighboring house, they hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. An elderly woman answered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Can I help you?" she asked, a hint of concern creasing her forehead. "Hi, we're Amelia and Jenna. We just moved into the old Wilkins place," Amelia said, forcing a smile despite the apprehension that gripped her. "Oh dear," the woman said, her voice trembling. "You're the first to stay in that house for years. I thought it was abandoned." "Abandoned?" Jenna echoed, her stomach twisting in knots. "What do you mean?" The woman stepped aside, beckoning them into her cozy living room, filled with warm light and the scent of freshly baked cookies. "Come in. I might have some stories that could help you." As they sat down, the woman poured them each a cup of tea, her hands shaking slightly. The Wilkins family was different. People said strange things happened in that house. Noises, shadows, and even sightings of a man in a long coat lurking in the yard at night. "Do you know what happened to them?" Amelia asked, leaning in closer, her heart pounding. The woman hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. They were good people, but they became paranoid. After the strange occurrences started, they isolated themselves. And then, one day they were gone, just like that. No one knows where they went. Jenna exchanged a worried glance with Amelia. "Did anyone ever investigate?" "Yes, but they found nothing. The police wrote it off as a missing persons case. No signs of struggle. Nothing at all. It was as if they vanished into thin air." "Did you ever see the dark figure?" Amelia pressed, her curiosity piqued. The woman shuddered, taking a deep breath. "I saw something once, but I never spoke of it. I don't want to scare you, but it wasn't just a shadow. It felt sentient, like it was watching, waiting." "What do you mean?" Jenna asked, her voice low. "It was as if it knew us, knew our fears. It was chilling. I haven't stepped foot near that house in years." Amelia felt a cold sweat prickling at the back of her neck. "Do you think it's still there?" "I fear it is," the woman said, her eyes reflecting a deep sorrow. "That house holds darkness. You must be careful." The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of the woman's words sinking in. Jenna broke the silence. "What should we do?" The woman looked at them intently, as if weighing her next words carefully. "If you truly wish to uncover the truth, you must confront it. But know this, shadows do not forgive. They do not forget." "Thank you for your warning," Amelia said, her heart racing. "We'll be careful." As they left the woman's home, the night felt darker, the shadows more oppressive. "What do you think we should do next?" Jenna asked, glancing back at the Wilkins house. "I think we should go back," Amelia said, her resolve hardening. "We need to confront whatever is in there. We have to see if there's something we missed." "Are you sure?" Jenna's voice trembled slightly. "What if we find more messages? More shadows? We can't let fear control us. We need answers," Amelia replied firmly. Reluctantly, Jenna nodded, her eyes wide with trepidation. "Okay, but let's be cautious. We don't know what we're dealing with." They returned to the house, the air growing heavier with each step they took toward the front door. Amelia hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. The shadows seemed to throb with anticipation, as if the house itself was waiting for them. "On three," Jenna suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, 1, 2, 3. They burst through the door, the stale air of the house enveloping them like a thick fog. The darkness loomed around them, but Amelia felt a surge of determination. They had come too far to turn back now. "Let's start in the bedroom," Jenna suggested, her voice quavering. "That's where we found the first message." They climbed the staircase, each creak of the wood echoing like a whisper in the silence. As they entered the bedroom, the shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting into shapes that made Amelia's heart race. "Look, the bed," Jenna said, her eyes wide. It's still pushed away from the wall. Amelia knelt beside the bed, feeling the dust beneath her fingers as she prepared to look underneath once more. Let's see if there's anything else hidden. Jenna shone her flashlight beneath the bed, illuminating the space with a bright beam of light. I don't see anything, just dust and cobwebs. Amelia was about to give up when she noticed something glimmering in the corner. Wait, there's something. She reached under, pulling out a small object. It was a locket, tarnished with age and dirt. She held it up to the light, feeling a shiver run down her spine. This must belong to one of the girls. What's inside? Jenna asked, peering over her shoulder. Amelia carefully opened the locket, revealing a faded photograph of two young girls. One with bright blonde hair and a radiant smile, the other with dark curls and an expression of mischief. Beneath the photo, something was etched into the metal. Forever together. They were sisters, Amelia murmured, feeling a strange connection to the girls in the photograph. But what happened to them? Suddenly, a loud creak echoed from the hallway, causing both girls to jump. What was that? Jenna gasped, her flashlight flickering. I don't know, Amelia replied, her heart pounding in her chest. But we need to find out. They exchanged nervous glances before venturing into the hallway, the atmosphere growing thicker with each step. The shadows clung to the walls like a living entity, as if trying to ensnare them in its grip. Where do we go? Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their own breathing. There was that attic door in the living room, Amelia recalled. Maybe we can find more answers there. As they made their way back down the hallway, the air felt charged with tension. With each step, the shadows shifted, their presence pressing down on the girls like a heavy blanket. When they reached the living room, Amelia's heart sank at the sight of the attic door. It was slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. Do you think it's safe? Jenna asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, but we can't back down now, Amelia replied, steeling her resolve. They approached the door cautiously, Amelia's heart racing as she pushed it open. The attic stairs creaked under their weight as they ascended, the darkness above swallowing them whole. When they reached the top, the musty air hit them like a wall, and Amelia's flashlight illuminated the space. It was filled with old boxes, dusty furniture, and forgotten memories. A heavy sense of unease washed over her as she stepped further into the attic. Look at this, Jenna said, pointing to a dusty trunk in the corner. It might contain something important. Amelia nodded, feeling a mix of hope and dread. They approached the trunk, its latch rusted and worn. Let's see what's inside, she said, pulling at the latch with trembling fingers. With a loud creak, the trunk popped open, revealing a collection of yellowed letters and photographs. As they sifted through the contents, Amelia's heart sank. The letters were filled with despair, recounting the family's slow descent into madness. I can't sleep. The shadows whisper to me at night. They say they want me. One letter read, "We have to leave this house. It's consuming us," another declared. What does it mean? Jenna asked, her voice trembling as she read over Amelia's shoulder. It means they were right to be afraid, Amelia said, her stomach knotting with dread. Whatever is in this house, it's still here. It hasn't let go. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the attic, extinguishing their flashlight. Darkness enveloped them, and Amelia felt a surge of panic. Jenna, I can't see, Jenna cried, her voice rising in panic. Stay close. We need to find the stairs, Amelia shouted, her heart racing. But as they stumbled through the darkness, the shadows closed in around them, whispering secrets that sent chills down their spines. Amelia, what do we do? Jenna's voice cracked with fear, echoing in the oppressive silence. Just keep moving, Amelia urged, her own voice trembling. We can't let it trap us. They rushed forward, desperately searching for the stairs, their breaths quickening in the suffocating darkness. The shadows seemed to swirl around them, and Amelia felt a presence closing in, pressing against her from all sides. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a soft voice echoed through the darkness. Help us, please. Amelia froze, the blood draining from her face. Did you hear that? Who's there? Jenna called out, her voice shaking. Help us, the voice repeated, and in that moment, the shadows receded slightly, revealing a flicker of light ahead. Follow the light, Amelia shouted, and they both sprinted toward it, hearts pounding. As they neared the light, it revealed the outline of a figure, a young girl with curly hair, her face pale and expression pleading. Help us escape, she cried, her voice filled with desperation. What do you mean? Amelia gasped, realizing with horror that the girl was one of the sisters from the photograph. They're coming for you. You must leave, the girl warned, her eyes wide with fear. Oh, what's happening? Jenna cried, but the girl's form began to flicker like a dying flame. Trust me, you have to go now. The girl reached out a hand, her fingers almost touching Amelia's. But just as Amelia reached for her, a loud crash echoed through the attic, sending them reeling backward. The shadows surged forward, engulfing the girl completely. No, Amelia screamed, feeling a surge of panic. We have to help her. But Jenna grabbed her arm, pulling her away. Amelia, we can't. It's too dangerous. With that, they turned and bolted down the stairs, the darkness chasing them as they raced back through the house. The whispers grew louder, echoing in their ears, filling their minds with dread. Get out! Get out! The voices chanted, merging into a chaotic symphony of terror. They stumbled through the living room and burst out the front door, collapsing onto the lawn, gasping for breath. The cold night air felt like a lifeline as they lay there, the weight of the shadows finally lifting. What just happened? Jenna panted, her eyes wide with shock. Amelia sat up, her heart racing as she looked back at the house. I think we need to go back. We can't leave her there. Jenna shook her head, fear evident in her eyes. Are you crazy? It's too dangerous. We just saw a ghost. But she's trapped. She needs our help. Amelia insisted, her voice trembling with urgency. Maybe she's not the only one who's trapped, Jenna whispered, glancing nervously at the house. Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself. I can't leave her behind. I can't let the darkness win. As she stood, Jenna grabbed her arm. Amelia, please. We need to think this through. We don't know what we're up against. We have to do it together, Jenna, Amelia said firmly. If we stick together, we can face anything. Jenna hesitated, fear written across her face. But then she nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. Okay, together. Let's do this. With newfound resolve, they turned back toward the house, their hearts racing. The shadows lurked within, but they were ready to confront whatever darkness awaited them. As they stepped back inside, the air thickened around them, and the shadows seemed to close in. This time, we're not running, Amelia declared, her voice steady. The house felt alive, its walls breathing around them. The whispers faded, leaving an eerie silence. They moved deeper into the heart of the darkness, ready to uncover the truth. And as they prepared to face the shadows head-on, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a far more terrifying journey. As Amelia and Jenna stepped deeper into the house, the atmosphere shifted, becoming almost tangible. The air felt thick and suffocating, weighed down by centuries of secrets and shadows. Amelia could hear her heart pounding in her chest, echoing in the silence like a war drum. We need to find that girl again, Jenna whispered, her voice barely above a breath. If she's still here, she might be able to tell us how to help her. Amelia nodded, determination igniting within her. She mentioned escaping. There must be something in this house that will reveal how. They moved cautiously through the darkened halls, their flashlights flickering uncertainly as they passed door after door. The walls seemed to close in on them, shadows shifting with every movement. With each step, Amelia felt an invisible force tugging at her, urging her to turn back. Amelia, do you feel that? Jenna asked, her voice trembling. Yeah, Amelia replied, trying to suppress her fear. It's like the house is alive, watching us. Let's check the basement, Jenna suggested, her eyes wide. If the girl is trapped, maybe there's a way to reach her down there. They cautiously made their way to the basement door, the heavy wood feeling like a barrier to their sanity. The door creaked ominously as Amelia turned the knob, revealing a dark staircase that spiraled down into the depths of the house. Do you really think we should? Jenna hesitated, her face pale under the glow of their flashlights. We have to know, Amelia insisted, her resolve stronger than ever. For the girl, and for the family. With a deep breath, they descended the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. The darkness enveloped them, and soon the faint light from the door above vanished. The basement was a vast expanse of shadows, filled with the faint smell of damp earth and decay. Is there a light switch? Jenna asked, fumbling against the wall. I don't know, Amelia replied, straining her eyes to see. But we'll have to rely on our flashlights for now. They moved deeper into the basement, their footsteps echoing against the cold concrete floor. The beam of their flashlights danced across the walls, revealing old tools, boxes, and remnants of forgotten memories. Suddenly, Amelia froze as she noticed something unusual on the wall, a series of scratches and etchings carved into the surface. Jenna, look at this, she exclaimed, pointing to the markings. Jenna squinted at the wall, stepping closer. What does it say? Amelia traced her fingers over the symbols, a shiver running down her spine. It looks like messages. They're almost like the ones we found under the bed. What do they say? Jenna asked, her voice hushed. Help us escape. The shadows know. They take. Amelia read aloud, her throat tightening with unease. This was their cry for help. Jenna looked around nervously. We need to find out where this leads. Maybe there's a hidden space down here. Amelia nodded, her mind racing. If the family was trying to escape, they might have hidden something that could help us understand what happened. They continued to explore, searching for any clues that might lead them to answers. The basement was a maze of old furniture and boxes, each one more decrepit than the last. As they rummaged through the darkness, Jenna stumbled upon a loose floorboard. Amelia, come here, Jenna called, her voice laced with excitement. What did you find? Amelia rushed over to her side. This floorboard is different, Jenna said, prying it open with her fingers. Beneath it lay a small, rusted latch. It's like a hidden compartment. Amelia knelt beside her, heart racing. Do you think it leads to something important? Only one way to find out, Jenna said, pulling at the latch. With a creak, the compartment opened to reveal a small, dusty box. They exchanged a glance filled with anticipation and trepidation before Amelia lifted the box out. It felt heavy and significant in her hands, almost pulsating with energy. Jenna wiped the dust away, revealing an ornate design etched into the surface. What's inside? Jenna asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Amelia opened the box slowly, and inside lay a collection of photographs, letters, and an old journal. These must belong to the family, she said, carefully removing the items. The first photograph showed the Wilkins family, two parents with their two daughters, all smiling happily. But beneath the surface of the smiles, Amelia noticed something unsettling in their eyes, a shadow of fear lurking just out of sight. Look at this, Amelia said, flipping through the photographs. They seemed happy, but something changed. What's that? Jenna pointed to a letter folded neatly at the bottom of the box. Amelia unfolded the letter, her hands trembling. It was a letter addressed to a friend, filled with desperate pleas for help. We can't stay here anymore. The shadows are closing in, and we can't fight them alone. Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes as she read on. Please, if you find this, tell someone about us. We're trapped. The shadows want to take us. This is so heartbreaking, Jenna said, her voice barely above a whisper. They were begging for help. Amelia continued to sift through the contents of the box until she came across the journal, its pages yellowed and worn. This might have more answers, she said, opening it carefully. The first few entries described mundane family life, but as Amelia read on, the tone shifted. The shadows are back. They whisper to us at night, calling our names. I can't sleep. I feel them watching. What if the shadows are feeding off their fear? Jenna suggested, her voice filled with dread. It makes sense, Amelia replied, flipping through more pages. Fear gives them power. But why are they still here? Why haven't they moved on? Amelia reached the last entry, and her breath caught in her throat. If anyone reads this, know that we tried to escape. but the shadows have taken my family, one by one. I'm the last left, and I fear I won't last long. If you find us, help us please." A heavy silence settled between them, the weight of the words pressing down on their chests. "This is so tragic," Jenna said, tears filling her eyes. "They were just trying to live their lives." "They need us," Amelia said, her voice strong. "We have to find a way to help them escape." Suddenly, the air around them grew colder, and the shadows seemed to flicker in agitation. "Amelia, we need to go," Jenna urged, glancing nervously at the dark corners of the basement. "No," Amelia said firmly. "Not yet. We have to do this." As if sensing her determination, the shadows surged forward, thickening around them. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around them like a cocoon. "You should have left," they hissed, their voices echoing in Amelia's mind. But Amelia stood her ground, clutching the journal tightly. "We won't leave until we help you." A piercing scream echoed through the basement, sending chills down their spines. "They're coming," Jenna shouted, panic lacing her voice. "Stay close," Amelia yelled, feeling the darkness closing in. "We need to find a way to free them." In the chaos, Amelia caught a glimpse of a door hidden behind a stack of boxes. "There, that might lead to the girl." They sprinted toward the door, pushing aside the boxes with all their strength. As they flung the door open, a blinding light flooded the basement, illuminating the shadows. The whispers faded, replaced by a haunting melody that seemed to call out to them. "What is this place?" Jenna gasped, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. "I think it's a passage," Amelia said, stepping cautiously inside. The light shimmered, revealing a narrow pathway that seemed to pulse with energy. "This might lead us to the girl. Are you sure we should go?" Jenna asked, uncertainty creeping back into her voice. "There's no turning back now," Amelia said, her heart racing with anticipation. "This is our chance to help her." They stepped into the light, feeling the warmth wash over them as they moved forward. The shadows recoiled, hissing in frustration as they ventured deeper into the passage. As they walked, the walls seemed to shimmer with memories, glimpses of the past flashing before their eyes. They saw the family laughing, playing, and living, but each scene slowly morphed into shadows lurking in the corners, waiting for their moment to strike. "Amelia, do you think we'll find a girl?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope so," Amelia replied, her heart filled with a mix of dread and hope. "We have to be brave, for her sake." The passage began to narrow, the light flickering ominously as they pressed forward. Just as doubt began to creep into Amelia's mind, they spotted a figure at the end of the corridor, a girl with curly hair, her face radiant in the light. "Help us," she cried, her eyes filled with desperation. "You're here to save us." "Yes, we want to help you," Amelia shouted, her heart pounding. The girl reached out a trembling hand, and as they approached, the darkness began to close in again, shadows swirling around them. "You have to hurry. The shadows are coming." "Follow me," the girl urged, her voice echoing with urgency. Together, they raced toward her, the shadows screaming in fury as they tried to pull Amelia and Jenna back. But with every step they took, the light pushed the darkness away, illuminating the path ahead. As they reached the girl, she smiled brightly. "You found me, but we need to leave now. Lead us," Amelia commanded, determination burning in her chest. With the girl guiding them, they sprinted down the corridor, the light growing stronger. The shadows writhed and screamed behind them, but Amelia refused to look back. They were so close to freedom, to rescuing the girl and breaking the curse of the house. Suddenly, the passage opened up into a vast chamber, filled with brilliant light. In the center stood an ethereal figure, an old woman, her eyes wise and sorrowful. "Welcome, children," she said, her voice resonating like a gentle breeze. "You've come to free them. Please, we need to save the girl and her family," Amelia pleaded, stepping forward. The woman nodded, her expression filled with understanding. "To release them, you must confront the shadows and show them that fear has no power here." Jenna clutched Amelia's arm, her heart racing. "How do we do that?" "You must speak the truth," The truth that lies in your hearts, the woman instructed, her voice soothing. Only then will the shadows lose their grip. Amelia felt the weight of the moment settle over her, her heart pounding. She turned to Jenna, determination gleaming in her eyes. We could do this. We need to believe in ourselves and in each other. The girl stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. You must remember us, not as shadows, but as we were, full of life and love. We deserve to be remembered. With that, Amelia took a deep breath, summoning all her courage. We see you. You were a family, and you deserve to be free from the shadows. As the words left her lips, a surge of light enveloped them, pushing the shadows away. The woman smiled, her eyes shining with approval. Together, speak your truth, she urged. Jenna stepped forward, her voice gaining strength. We refuse to be afraid. You will not take them from us. With each word, the light grew brighter, and the shadows shrieked in fury. They thrashed and writhed, desperate to hold on. But the light pierced through the darkness, illuminating the chamber. Let them go, Amelia shouted, feeling the energy surge around her. You cannot hold them, the shadows wailed, and one by one, they began to dissolve, releasing the souls trapped within. The girl smiled, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. Thank you. You're freeing us. The light grew blinding, and as the last of the shadows evaporated, the chamber filled with warmth and peace. Amelia felt a wave of relief wash over her as she turned to Jenna, who was grinning with disbelief. We did it. We actually did it. Look, Jenna exclaimed, pointing to the center of the chamber. The girl was transforming, her ghostly form becoming more solid, more real. Thank you, the girl said, her voice filled with warmth. You've saved us. Now we can finally be free. With a final smile, she stepped into the light, and in an instant, the room was filled with laughter, echoes of a family reunited at last. Amelia and Jenna watched in awe as the light enveloped the girl and her family, the shadows fading into nothingness. The house sighed, the weight of centuries lifted, and for the first time in years, it felt peaceful. Let's go home, Amelia said, tears of relief streaming down her face. Jenna nodded, her heart swelling with hope. Together, as they turned to leave, the old woman smiled at them, her presence gentle and kind. You have done well, brave souls. Remember, the light within you will always guide you through the darkness. With that, Amelia and Jenna stepped into the light, leaving the house behind. The night air felt fresh and alive, the stars twinkling above them like 1,000 promises. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, bound by friendship and the truth they had discovered. As they walked away, Amelia felt a sense of peace wash over her. They had not only saved the family, but had also unearthed their own strength in the process. Do you think we'll ever forget? Jenna asked, glancing back at the house one last time. No, Amelia replied, her heart swelling with hope. But we'll carry their light with us, always. And with that, they stepped into the night, ready to embrace whatever awaited them, united against the darkness. As Amelia and Jenna emerged from the house, the chill of the night air felt like a rejuvenating balm against the warmth of the light they had just experienced. They paused, glancing back at the once ominous structure now bathed in moonlight, its shadows receding like a bad dream. Can you believe we actually did it? Jenna asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. Amelia nodded, still in awe of their journey. It feels surreal, but I can't shake the feeling that this isn't the end. There are still unanswered questions. As they began to walk away, the woods around them seemed to whisper, the leaves rustling softly in the breeze. It was as if the very air had been infused with the stories of those who had come before, stories of fear, love, and longing for freedom. Do you think the family will finally be at peace? Jenna asked, her gaze lingering on the house one last time. I hope so, Amelia replied, her heart heavy with the weight of the family's history. They deserve to find rest after everything they went through. Suddenly, a thought struck Amelia. What about the girl? Do you think she will always be tied to that house? Jenna frowned, considering. Maybe not. The light we saw, It felt like a rebirth for her. If she's free now, she might have the chance to find a new life. As they reached the edge of the woods, Amelia's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her mom. "Are you girls okay? You disappeared. We were worried." "Let's call them," Jenna suggested, pulling out her own phone. They quickly called their parents, reassuring them they were fine and explaining their adventure. Both sets of parents were relieved, but Amelia could hear the underlying concern in their voices. After hanging up, they decided to head to Jenna's house, needing a safe space to process everything that had happened. The walk felt different now. The world around them seemed more vibrant, the colors sharper, and the air filled with an electric charge. As they arrived at Jenna's house, the familiar surroundings felt like a sanctuary. They settled on the couch, their hearts still racing from the night's events. "Let's go through the box again," Amelia suggested, her curiosity piqued. "Maybe there's something we missed." Jenna nodded enthusiastically. They retrieved the box from Amelia's bag, carefully spreading the photographs, letters, and journal on the coffee table. Amelia picked up the journal, flipping through the pages once more. "I can't help but wonder if the house is still connected to the girl, even now that she's free. Maybe there are still remnants of the shadows that could affect others." "That's a scary thought," Jenna said, biting her lip. "Do you think we should tell someone? Like the police or a paranormal investigator?" Amelia thought for a moment. "Maybe, but what will we even say? Hey, we found a girl who used to be trapped in a haunted house. They'd think we were crazy." "True," Jenna agreed, looking pensive. "But if the house has a history, it might be worth documenting." As they continued to explore the contents of the box, Amelia's fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. She pulled out a small locket, its surface tarnished but still beautiful. "What's that?" Jenna asked, peering over. "I don't know," Amelia replied, carefully opening it. Inside, she found a picture of the girl from the photographs. Only this time she was alone, her expression somber. "Do you think it belonged to her?" Jenna asked, leaning closer. "Maybe," Amelia whispered, her heart aching for the girl. "It's like a piece of her past, a memory she held on to." They stared at the locket, feeling the weight of its significance. "What if the locket is a key?" Jenna suggested suddenly. "Maybe it can unlock something about the house or the shadows." Amelia's eyes lit up with realization. "You might be onto something." The house seemed to have a connection to her. Maybe the locket holds the final piece of the puzzle. They began to investigate the locket more closely. It had a tiny inscription on the back, barely visible. "To my beloved, always remembered." Who do you think it was meant for? Jenna pondered, her eyes filled with curiosity. "I don't know, but it must be important," Amelia said, feeling a surge of energy. "Let's see if it fits anywhere in the house." "Do you really think we should go back?" Jenna asked, uncertainty creeping back into her voice. "We have to," Amelia replied, a sense of urgency igniting within her. "If there's a chance we can help more people or understand what happened better, we can't ignore it." Jenna took a deep breath, her expression resolute. "Okay, let's do it. But we need to be cautious this time." They spent the next hour gathering supplies, flashlights, a first aid kit, and their phones for safety. The weight of the night's earlier events hung over them, but they pushed aside their fear, fueled by the hope of uncovering more truths. As they approached the house once again, the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the surroundings. The air felt thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to dance at the edges of their vision. "This is it," Jenna whispered, clutching the locket tightly. "Let's stick together," Amelia said, steeling herself. "We'll find the answers we need." They stepped inside, the familiar creaks of the old floorboards echoing around them. The house felt different this time. It was as if it recognized them, acknowledging their purpose. "Where should we look first?" Jenna asked, scanning the dimly lit rooms. "Let's start with the basement again," Amelia suggested, feeling drawn to it. "That's where we found the box, and it might still hold more secrets." They made their way to the basement, the air growing colder as they descended the stairs. The shadows seemed to shift into corners, but Amelia felt a sense of purpose driving her forward. "Over here," Jenna called, pointing to the area where they had found the hidden compartment. "What if there's something else here?" Amelia nodded, feeling the anticipation building within her. They began to rummage through the boxes, searching for any clues that could lead them to more answers. As they dug deeper, Jenna suddenly gasped. "Look at this." She held up a small, ornate key, glimmering in the dim light. "It must be important. Do you think it could unlock something in the house?" Amelia took the key, feeling its cold metal against her skin. "It's possible. Let's check the upstairs rooms. There might be something locked away." As they moved back upstairs, the house felt different, less oppressive, as if it were allowing them to explore its secrets. They tried doors, but most were either unlocked or led to empty rooms. Finally, they reached the last door at the end of the hallway, the one that had been locked during their previous visit. Amelia's heart raced as she inserted the key into the rusty lock, holding her breath. With a soft click, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with dust and cobwebs. The air felt charged, tingling against their skin. "What is this place?" Jenna whispered, peering inside. The room was filled with old furniture, a forgotten library filled with ancient books, and in the center stood a small table with a dusty mirror. "It looks like a study," Amelia observed, stepping inside. "Check out those books," Jenna said, gesturing to the shelves. "They might have information about the family or the house." As Amelia approached the shelves, she noticed something odd about the mirror. It was covered in dust, but the surface seemed different, almost as if it was still used. "Jenna, come look at this," Amelia called, feeling a sense of unease wash over her. Jenna stepped closer, her expression turning serious. "It looks like the same mirror from the basement. Do you think it has something to do with the shadows?" "I think it might," Amelia replied, tracing her fingers over the edge of the mirror. "But why is it here?" Suddenly, a low whisper echoed through the room, sending shivers down their spines. "Help us." Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she turned to Jenna, who looked equally frightened. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," Jenna whispered, her eyes wide. "What was that?" The whispers grew louder, filling the room with desperation. "Help us, please." Amelia felt a surge of determination. "We need to confront this. Whatever is in this mirror, it's connected to everything." Jenna nodded, her fear transforming into resolve. "Let's find out what it wants." With trembling hands, Amelia reached for the mirror, brushing away the dust covering its surface. As she did, the whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tempest. "You must know the truth," a voice echoed, haunting and familiar. Amelia felt a rush of emotions as images flooded her mind. Visions of the family, their laughter, their pain, and their longing for freedom. "What do you want us to see?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear swirling within her. "Remember us," the voice urged, filled with a sorrow that cut through the air. "Help us be free." As the shadows in the room began to shift, Amelia glanced at Jenna, who nodded, her expression resolute. "We will help you," Jenna said firmly. "We promise." With that declaration, the mirror's surface rippled, and a swirling vortex of memories erupted from within, enveloping them in light and darkness. The past echoed around them, revealing the secrets of the house, the shadows it held, and the family that had once lived there. Amelia and Jenna stood together, united against the whispers, ready to face whatever awaited them in the depths of the mirror's reflection. As the swirling vortex of memories enveloped Amelia and Jenna, the world around them faded, replaced by the vivid sights and sounds of the past. They found themselves standing in a sunlit room, filled with warmth and laughter. The air was alive with the chatter of a family at play. "Look," Amelia pointed, her heart racing as they observed a girl, around their age, playing with a small doll. She was laughing, her face radiant, and for a moment, the heaviness that had gripped their hearts lifted. "That must be her," Jenna exclaimed, tears forming in her eyes. "The girl from the photographs." But as the laughter echoed around them, a shadow flickered at the edge of the scene, darkening the room's warmth. It danced around the corners, lurking, waiting. "Do you see that?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jenna nodded, fear creeping back into her heart. "It's like it's watching her." Suddenly, the scene shifted. The vibrant colors dulled, replaced by stormy skies. The laughter turned to cries, and the girl's face twisted in fear. The The shadow grew larger, swallowing the light, suffocating the joy that had once filled the room. "Help us," the girl's voice echoed, but it was now tinged with desperation. "Please, help me." Amelia felt the weight of the girl's pain pressing against her chest. "We have to do something." "Wait," Jenna shouted. "Let's see what happens next." As the scene shifted again, they found themselves in a darkened hallway, the girl running away from the shadow. It reached for her, its form shifting and writhing like a dark cloud of smoke. "Please don't," she screamed, but her cries were swallowed by the darkness. Amelia felt her heart break as the girl stumbled, falling to the ground. "This can't be happening," she cried, reaching out as if she could somehow pull the girl to safety. In that moment of anguish, Amelia felt a surge of energy coursing through her. "We have to connect with her. She needs us." "Do you think it will work?" Jenna asked, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "There's only one way to find out," Amelia replied, determination setting her jaw. "We have to show her that she isn't alone. We have to remind her of who she is." With that, they called out to the girl, their voices ringing with encouragement. "You are not alone. We're here for you." The girl paused, her face illuminated by a flicker of hope. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're Amelia and Jenna," Amelia shouted, her heart racing. "We want to help you. We know what you've been through." The girl blinked, confusion mingling with fear. "Help me? But the shadows, they won't let me go. Together, we can face them," Jenna shouted, her voice unwavering. "You have the strength to break free. You're not trapped anymore." The shadow surged forward, dark and menacing, attempting to smother their words. "Silence," it roared, its voice a guttural echo of anger. Amelia and Jenna stood their ground, refusing to be intimidated. "You are not in control," Amelia shouted, her voice filled with conviction. "This is your story, not theirs." Suddenly, the girl stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. "No, I won't let you take me again," she cried, and with that proclamation, a light began to emanate from her. The shadow recoiled, momentarily stunned. "You cannot escape me," it hissed, its form flickering with rage. "Yes, I can," the girl shouted, her voice steady. "I am more than my fears. I choose to be free." The light surrounding her grew brighter, illuminating the room and pushing the shadows back. Amelia and Jenna felt the warmth envelop them, filling them with strength and courage. "Keep going," Jenna urged. "You can do this." The girl's confidence soared as she faced the shadow, the darkness swirling around her in chaos. "You have no power over me," she declared, and the light burst forth like a supernova, engulfing the shadow in its brilliance. The room shook with energy, the air crackling as the darkness fought against the light. But with each word of defiance, the girl's resolve only grew stronger. "Help me break these chains," she cried, and as if in response, tendrils of darkness began to unravel from around her, disintegrating into nothingness. Amelia and Jenna felt a surge of hope as they witnessed the girl's transformation. "You're doing it," Amelia exclaimed, her heart racing with exhilaration. The girl turned to them, her eyes shining with determination. "Join me. We can conquer this together." With a collective effort, Amelia and Jenna raised their hands, channeling their own strength into the girl. "You are free," they shouted in unison, their voices echoing through the darkness. The shadows writhed and twisted, their forms collapsing under the weight of the light. With a final roar, the darkness shattered, scattering into millions of tiny fragments that faded into the ether. As the dust settled, the room transformed, bathed in a warm, golden light. The girl stood tall, her expression filled with gratitude and joy. "Thank you," she whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you for believing in me." "You did this," Jenna said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You found your strength." Amelia stepped forward, feeling a deep connection to the girl. "What's your name?" she asked, wanting to know the identity of the spirit they had freed. "I'm Alara," she replied, a smile breaking through her tears. "I was trapped for so long, but now I feel free." Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The warmth enveloping them began to fade, and Amelia felt a sense of urgency creeping in. "What happens now, Alara?" she asked, her heart racing. "I have to go," Alara replied, her voice soft but resolute. "But I'll always be grateful for your help. You've given me a chance at peace." "No, wait," Jenna cried, reaching out to her. "Can we see you again? How will we know you're safe?" Alara smiled, a radiant glow surrounding her. "You'll know. I'll always be with you in spirit, watching over you." With those words, Alara began to fade, the light around her shimmering like stardust. "Remember, you are never alone," she said, her voice echoing as she vanished into the air. As silence fell over the room, Amelia and Jenna stood in awe, feeling the weight of the moment settle around them. They had faced the darkness, uncovered the truth, and helped a lost soul find her way home. "We did it," Amelia whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "We really did it." Jenna nodded, her expression a mix of disbelief and pride. "But what does this mean for the house, for the shadows that remain?" Amelia took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity wash over her. "We need to document everything we've learned. This house holds many secrets, and we can't let the shadows return. Let's make sure we spread the word," Jenna said, her determination shining through. "We need to protect others from the darkness that lingers here." With renewed purpose, they began to gather the contents of the room, determined to honor Alara's memory and ensure that her story would not be forgotten. As they worked, the atmosphere felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the house dissipating. They knew that while shadows may always exist, they had the power to confront them together. "Are you ready to go?" Jenna asked, glancing around the room one last time. "Yeah," Amelia replied, her heart full. "Let's leave this place behind, but take Alara's spirit with us." As they stepped out of the house, the first rays of dawn began to break through the horizon. The world felt renewed, filled with hope and possibility. "Goodbye, Alara," Amelia whispered, glancing back at the house one last time. "Thank you for showing us the way." The first rays of dawn spilled over the horizon as Amelia and Jenna stepped out of the old house, their hearts lighter than they had been just hours before. The lingering darkness that once clouded their minds began to dissolve, but a nagging feeling of unfinished business tugged at them. "Do you think we really got rid of all the shadows?" Jenna asked, glancing back at the house, its once foreboding structure now appearing almost serene in the morning light. "I hope so," Amelia replied, though doubt crept into her voice. "But I can't shake the feeling that there's still something lurking beneath the surface. We have to make sure this place is truly free." As they walked toward the edge of the property, the air began to change. A sudden chill swept through the morning warmth, and the once peaceful atmosphere shifted, thickening with tension. A low whisper drifted on the breeze, sending shivers down Amelia's spine. "Did you hear that?" Jenna asked, her eyes wide with alarm. "It sounded like voices," Amelia replied, straining to listen. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of sorrow and anger blending into an ominous chorus. "We need to go back." Reluctantly, they turned and made their way back toward the house, each step heavy with dread. As they crossed the threshold, the warmth of the morning sunlight vanished, replaced by an icy grip that wrapped around their hearts. The interior of the house was different now. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting and writhing as if alive. The air crackled with energy, a palpable tension that set their nerves on edge. "Are you ready for this?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." As they stepped into the main room, the mirror from earlier loomed before them, its surface swirling with dark hues that reflected their anxious expressions. The whispers intensified, pulling at the edges of their minds, attempting to draw them in. Help us be free," the voices pleaded, echoing through the chamber. "Who are you?" Amelia demanded, her voice firm as she faced the mirror. "What do you want from us?" The surface of the mirror rippled violently, and a dark figure emerged from the depths, its form shifting and changing, barely recognizable, yet filled with a sense of malevolence. The shadows that had once been mere reflections now loomed large, threatening to engulf them. You think you've won? The figure hissed, its voice a chilling echo that resonated in their bones. You've freed one, but countless others remain trapped in the darkness. You cannot save them all. Why are you doing this? Jenna shouted, her fear morphing into anger. What do you gain from keeping them trapped? The figure laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Fear is power. As long as I exist, I will feed on the terror and sorrow of these lost souls. They are mine to command. We won't let you control them anymore, Amelia declared, her heart racing with determination. You can't hold them against their will. With a surge of courage, she stepped closer to the mirror, reaching out toward the swirling darkness. Alara broke free, and we will help the others too. Your reign of terror ends here. The figure recoiled, its form twisting and contorting in anger. Foolish children, you think your bravery can defeat me? You don't understand the depths of my power. But Amelia and Jenna stood united, their hands clasped together, channeling the energy they had gained from their journey. They felt Alara's spirit within them, guiding their resolve. Together, we can face the darkness. Jenna shouted, her voice unwavering. You're not invincible. With those words, they focused their thoughts, envisioning the light that had surrounded Alara. The warmth surged through them, amplifying their strength. Leave these souls alone, Amelia cried, the power building within her. You have no hold over them. The shadows writhed and screamed, the dark figure thrashing against the light that emanated from the two girls. You cannot banish me. I will always return, not if we can help it, Jenna added, her voice strong and defiant. You will not have power over fear anymore. As they shouted in unison, the light around them expanded, pushing against the darkness with relentless force. The mirror shattered, the pieces glinting in the light like stars as they scattered across the room. But the dark figure only grew more furious. You think you can escape your fate? I am eternal. Amelia felt a surge of anger and fear wash over her. You may have been eternal, but you're nothing without your power. You feed on our fear, but you can't have it anymore. With one final push, they focused their energy, channeling every ounce of bravery and strength they had left. We are not afraid, they yelled together, the words resonating like a battle cry. The darkness screamed, the sound reverberating through the house as the light intensified, engulfing everything in a brilliant glow. The shadows writhed and twisted, struggling against the force of their combined strength. With a deafening crack, the dark figure shattered into 1,000 pieces, scattering like ashes in the wind. The oppressive weight that had filled the room lifted, and for the first time, they felt truly free. Breathing heavily, Amelia and Jenna looked at each other, the realization of what they had just accomplished sinking in. The house around them began to change. The oppressive shadows receded, replaced by a warm, welcoming light that filled every corner. We did it, Jenna breathed, tears of relief streaming down her face. We really did it. Amelia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. We faced our fears together. Alara's light guided us. But as the dust settled and the shadows faded, a new sense of purpose filled the air. We need to make sure others know about this place. We have to share what we've learned. Jenna nodded, determination etched on her face. We'll write down everything, warn others about the darkness that lurks in forgotten places. As they stepped outside, the sunlight bathed them in warmth, signaling a new beginning. They knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be shadows to confront, but they were ready. We're stronger together, Amelia said, her heart filled with hope. And we'll continue to fight for those who can't. Together, they walked away from the house, leaving the past behind, but carrying the memories of those they had freed in their hearts. Goodbye, Alara, Amelia whispered as they left, knowing that they had made a difference, one brave soul at a time. The first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, illuminating the path ahead as Amelia and Jenna made their way back home. The world around them felt different, brighter, somehow, as if the shadows had retreated to the corners of reality, leaving only the light in their wake. But while the house had been freed from its darkness, their hearts still carried the weight of the experiences they had faced. What do you think will happen now? Jenna asked, glancing back at the old house, now a distant silhouette against the morning sky. "I don't know," Amelia replied, her brow furrowed in thought. "But I hope Alara and the others can finally rest in peace. They deserve it. Do you think that thing could ever come back?" Jenna's voice trembled slightly at the thought. Amelia paused, considering the question. "It could try, but we'll be ready. We know what to do now." As they walked, the memories of the night flooded back to Amelia. Every whisper, every shadow that had lurked around them. The encounters felt surreal, like a dream woven from threads of fear and courage. But they had emerged stronger, bound by the shared experience that had tested their resolve. Once they reached the safety of Amelia's home, they settled down in her room, the familiar walls surrounding them like a comforting embrace. They brought out a notebook and began to write, pouring their hearts into the pages. "We need to document everything. What we found, what we felt, what we learned," Amelia suggested. "If we can help even one person avoid what we went through, it will be worth it." Jenna nodded, her eyes glistening with determination. "Let's start with the message under the bed." That's where it all began. As they wrote, they revisited each moment. The chilling discovery, the eerie whispers, and the climactic confrontation with the shadow. The act of writing felt cathartic, allowing them to release the lingering fears that clung to them. Hours passed as they scribbled furiously, their ideas flowing onto the pages like a river of truth. But as the sun began to set, a sense of unease crept back into the room. Amelia paused, looking up from her writing. "Do you ever feel like something is still watching us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jenna's expression mirrored her concern. "I have. Even here, it feels like something is lurking just beyond our view. Maybe it's just the remnants of everything we experienced," Amelia suggested, trying to rationalize the feelings. But deep down, she felt a cold knot of apprehension tightening in her chest. As dusk enveloped the world outside, they decided to take a break from their writing. They stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the cool evening air. The stars began to twinkle above them, a comforting sight amidst the uncertainties swirling in their minds. "I can't shake the feeling that our journey isn't over," Jenna admitted, her voice soft but steady. Amelia leaned against the railing, contemplating Jenna's words. "You're right. There's still work to do, and we need to make sure that everyone knows about the dangers that can hide in plain sight." The night deepened, and an unsettling calm settled over the neighborhood. Just as they turned to head back inside, Amelia's heart dropped as she noticed a shadow move in the corner of her vision. She spun around, but nothing was there. "Did you see that?" she exclaimed, her pulse racing. "What? What did you see?" Jenna asked, her eyes wide with concern. "I thought I saw a shadow, just over there." Amelia pointed toward the edge of their yard where the trees loomed. Jenna stepped closer, peering into the darkness. "Maybe it's just a trick of the light. You know how the shadows can play with your mind after everything we've seen." "Yeah, but..." Amelia hesitated, the feeling of being watched returning with a vengeance. "I can't shake this feeling." Deciding to dismiss their fears, they returned inside and continued their writing. However, the tension remained, a thick blanket of unease hovering in the air. As they finished their entries for the night, Amelia couldn't help but feel that their battle was not yet over. That lingering sense of dread was like a dark cloud, threatening to rain down fear once again. "Do you think we should go back to the house?" Jenna asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "Maybe we should," Amelia replied, a knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. "If there's even a chance that something is still lingering, we need to confront it head on. Then let's go together. We can't let fear control us anymore," Jenna said, determination shining in her eyes. As they prepared to leave, Amelia grabbed a flashlight, feeling the weight of their choice settling heavily upon her shoulders. "This time, we're ready." The drive to the old house felt longer than before, the shadows creeping alongside them like silent specters. When they finally arrived, the structure loomed ominously, cloaked in darkness. But they pressed on, their hearts pounding in unison as they stepped inside. The air was still, thick with the remnants of past fears, but Amelia felt a sense of resolve wash over her. They were not the same frightened girls who had stumbled into this house weeks before. They were warriors now, equipped with knowledge and the courage to face whatever awaited them. "Let's check the basement," Jenna suggested, her voice steady as she shone the flashlight into the darkness. Amelia nodded, leading the way as they descended the creaking stairs, each step echoing in the stillness. The basement was cold, the shadows clinging to the corners like forgotten memories. They searched every inch of the space, their flashlights illuminating the cobwebs and debris. But as they moved deeper into the darkness, they discovered something unexpected. A small, hidden compartment behind an old stack of crates. "What's this?" Amelia asked, kneeling down to investigate. Inside the compartment lay a dusty journal, its pages yellowed and fragile. Jenna's eyes widened as she pulled it out. "It looks like it belonged to Alara. We need to read this." As they flipped through the pages, the words danced before them. Alara's struggles, her fears, and the darkness that had trapped her for so long. Each entry resonated with their own experiences, revealing the depths of her pain and the strength she had summoned to fight back. "Look at this," Jenna exclaimed, her finger tracing a passage. She wrote about a ritual to banish the shadows, a way to set the trapped souls free. Amelia's heart raced with hope. If we can find out how to do it, we might finally put an end to this nightmare. They carefully copied the instructions, their excitement mounting with each word. But as they prepared to leave the basement, the air began to shift. A familiar chill slithered around them, and the whispers returned, echoing in the darkness. Help us be free." "No," Amelia whispered, her breath hitching in her throat. "Not again." Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, coiling around them like serpents, and the temperature plummeted. "Stay close," Jenna shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to stick together." The darkness clawed at their minds, filling them with terror as they stumbled back against the wall. "Find a light," Amelia cried, her heart racing as they desperately searched for an escape. But the shadows pressed in, threatening to swallow them whole. Just as despair began to creep in, the journal slipped from Jenna's grasp, its pages scattering like leaves in the wind. In that moment, a bright light erupted from the journal, illuminating the basement in a warm glow. The shadows recoiled, their dark forms dissolving into wisps of smoke as the light expanded, pushing against the darkness. "Together," Amelia shouted, her heart racing as they instinctively reached for each other's hands. The power of their bond surged through them, and as the light enveloped the room, they felt Alara's presence, the strength of her spirit guiding them, urging them to stand tall against the encroaching shadows. "Leave us alone," they yelled, their voices uniting in defiance. The shadows writhed and screamed, but the light continued to grow, banishing the darkness until only Alara's journal remained, floating gently in the air, its pages glowing with the warmth of freedom. As the last remnants of the shadows evaporated, a calm settled over them. The basement was once again a place of solace, the oppressive weight lifted. Panting, Amelia and Jenna exchanged glances, realization dawning upon them. They had faced the darkness once more and emerged victorious. "Let's get out of here," Amelia said, her heart still racing. As they ascended the stairs, the air felt lighter, almost joyful. They stepped outside into the moonlight, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. "We did it, Jenna," Amelia said, tears of relief filling her eyes. "We faced it again, and we won. Together," Jenna replied, her voice filled with awe. With the journal tucked safely in hand, they knew their journey wasn't just about their own fears. It was about sharing the stories of those lost in darkness, bringing light to others who might be struggling. They had become more than friends. They were a beacon of hope. The morning sun cast its golden rays across the landscape, bathing the world in a warm, inviting glow. Amelia and Jenna stood outside the old house, the remnants of the night's events still fresh in their minds. The air felt different now, almost as if it had been cleansed of the darkness that had once lingered like a shadow over their lives. As they made their way home, the journal tucked securely under Amelia's arm, a sense of purpose surged within them. They had faced their fears and emerged stronger, but their journey was far from over. The stories contained within Alara's journal were not just a testament to her struggle. They were a call to action for anyone who had ever felt trapped in darkness. "We need to share this," Amelia said, glancing at Jenna with renewed determination. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who might be feeling lost." Jenna nodded, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Let's organize a community meeting. We can invite everyone to come and listen to Alara's story. Maybe it can help others find the courage to face their own shadows." As they arrived home, the thrill of their plan electrified the air. They spent the day reaching out to friends and family, crafting flyers and spreading the word about their upcoming gathering. The anticipation built with each passing hour, and soon, a sense of hope began to radiate from their efforts. When the evening of the meeting finally arrived, the small community center buzzed with energy. Neighbors, friends, and even some strangers gathered, curious about the two girls who had faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale. Amelia and Jenna stood at the front, their hearts racing as they prepared to share their experience. Amelia took a deep breath, glancing at Jenna for reassurance. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to share something important with you, something that could change lives." As she spoke, she could feel the weight of the journal in her hands, a tangible reminder of the struggles Alara had faced. With each word, she recounted their journey, the discovery of the message under the bed, the haunting whispers, the confrontation with the shadow, and ultimately, the revelation of Alara's story. Jenna chimed in, sharing the details from the journal, highlighting the lessons they had learned about courage, friendship, and the importance of facing one's fears. The room fell silent as they spoke, the audience captivated by their tale of resilience. Amelia noticed a woman in the back, tears streaming down her cheeks as she listened intently. It struck her how powerful their story was, how it resonated with the struggles others faced every day. When they finished, the room erupted in applause, a wave of support washing over them. The energy was palpable, filled with hope and camaraderie. People began to share their own stories of fear and darkness, creating a bond that transcended their individual experiences. As the night wore on, Amelia and Jenna felt a profound sense of purpose. They were no longer just girls who had faced a shadow. They were beacons of light, helping others navigate through their own struggles. After the meeting, Amelia approached the woman from the back, who was still wiping her tears. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. The woman nodded, her voice shaky but sincere. "I lost my husband last year. I thought I was losing my mind, feeling him around me, but now I understand. It's like I was living in darkness. Your story reminded me that I can find the light again." Amelia's heart swelled with empathy. "You're not alone. We all face our shadows. But together, we can find our way back into the light." The woman smiled, her eyes glistening with newfound hope. "Thank you for sharing your story. It gives me strength." As they continued to connect with others, Amelia and Jenna realized the power of community and healing. They decided to hold regular meetings, providing a safe space for people to share their experiences and support one another. Each gathering became a catalyst for healing, as stories of darkness were met with rays of light. Weeks turned into months, and the community grew stronger. Amelia and Jenna remained at the forefront, using the lessons learned from Alara's journal to inspire others. They held workshops, organized support groups, and created a network of understanding that spread far beyond their small town. One night, as they sat together reflecting on their journey, Jenna turned to Amelia with a smile. "Can you believe how far we've come? It feels like a lifetime ago that we found that message under your bed." Amelia chuckled, the memory both haunting and empowering. "I never imagined it would lead us here. We've helped so many people find their strength. Alara's story is a legacy now." Their laughter echoed into the night, a testament to their bond and the journey they had embarked on together. As they looked out at the stars twinkling above, Amelia felt a sense of peace wash over her. The darkness they had faced was no longer a weight. It was a part of their story, woven into the tapestry of their lives. "Do you think we'll ever fully understand what happened that night?" Jenna asked, her eyes searching the sky. "Maybe not," Amelia replied thoughtfully. "But we've learned that the shadows can't define us. They're just a part of our journey." And with that, they embraced the future, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger, braver, and forever illuminated by the light of hope. If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe and like the video.